Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Board of Education meeting. But before we start, just wanted to review the process to the public participation. Due to a virtual board meeting, we unfortunately cannot have community members here present to be able to give their statement. We have Mrs. Morris sitting in the back. If you would like to put in public comments, please remember, you must be a member or live within the Talawanda School District. You must give your address and your name. You must make sure that all comments are appropriate. You may start writing them at any point in time right now, but once the session closes, no more comments will be accepted or read at that point. Remember to use appropriate language. You will only have 250 characters at a time. So if you need to write a lot, sometimes it's easier to cut and paste from a Word document, or just realize that you might have to go into 2 or 3 different chat boxes to get everything that you need. So welcome, and I'm going to turn it over to President Otto.
Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Ms. Tafowski, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Dr. Knight Abowitz?
Here.
Dr. Howard?
Here.
Mr. Mead?
Here.
Mr. Otto?
Here.
Dr. Roberts?
Here.
All in attendance.
Dr. Thoreau, do you have a recommendation on the agenda?
I do. I am recommending that the board approve the agenda as amended. And the amendment was we added a PowerPoint under the treasurer's report that contains some information, and that's the only change.
Thank you. So do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Ms. Tafowski, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Mead?
Yes.
Dr. Knight Abowitz?
Yes.
Dr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Would you please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. At this time, I'd like to welcome the public to participate in the meeting. Ms. Morris, do we have any comments?
Do not.
You want to give it 1 minute? This is the last opportunity to participate in the public session. If you are typing right now, please write, hang on a minute. Otherwise, in 1 minute, we will be moving on. Thank you. Mrs. Morris, is there anybody?
So items from the treasurer, Ms. Tafowski.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Items from the treasurer?
Yes. So we're going to do a couple things tonight. We're going to go over and review the forecast a little bit. We're going to do an update on the revenue and expenditures. We're going to take a brief look at whether we are trending towards an operating deficit this year. We're going to review the Auditor of State definitions of fiscal distress. We're going to review the performance audit that was completed by the Auditor of State March 26. And then we are going to just talk about where we're going to go from here.
All right, thank you.
So if you want to follow along with the PowerPoint, let's start with slide number 3. So this is an update from our 5-year forecast that we approved last month. for this right now, since I've learned a little bit more information, I just wanted to give you an update on some of the revenue changes that I've made. I have not touched the expenditures because there are so many unknowns right now that I thought it best to keep everything consistent to what we had already planned and appropriated. So until we know items that are going to be changed or anything, it's best to just keep it consistent. So the items that I did touch were the real property, the property tax, and the tangible personal property. In May, I had kept everything flat and consistent so that we knew that there might be delinquencies, but they could cross and catch up later. Now I think that delinquency is going to be even greater, so I did take an 8% reduction. So sorry. We're going to take an 8% reduction in the real property and the tangible personal property. It's going to slide. It's going to slide and be caught up in the upcoming years. But for this fiscal year 21 is the only one that we're worrying about right now. So I decided it was best to take an 8% cut. So there's that. And then in the school district income tax, I rethought it and I took a 20% cut overall for the year. I reduced it as a whole based overall. I think we took an 8% cut in May. I thought 20% was best because economists and the World Bank are predicting a 6 to 7% decline in our economy in 2020, with the job market taking longer to recover. I wanted to prepare us for the worst case scenario. I brought 2022 back to the fiscal year 20 levels. So this is only being affected in fiscal year 21. Until we have more data, we're only going to worry about 21 as far as making these changes. Our state allocation is going to remain at a 10% reduction until we get confirmation. I literally just took it as what they cut us as an overall annual percentage reduction for this year and kept it consistent with next year. Once Governor DeWine gives us an update, we can adjust it if necessary. But I think 10% is a fairly accurate prediction at this point in time. Were all of these extreme? Probably, but like I said, I'd rather prepare us for the worst case scenario and then be able to say, yay, we're in good shape, versus really budgeting high and then they come in lower and saying, I would rather do that than say, oops, sorry, community members, I was wrong. Any questions on this slide?
So when I went back and looked at what Mr. Davis gave us in, I think, February 2020, the report for the month, he had expenditures at $39.3 million, and that's exactly what you still have, correct? In this?
I've kept all expenditures the same.
Right.
This year and going forward into the future years.
So that's not taken into account, like you had one slide somewhere about some money we saved.
That's not taking that into
Okay,
consideration.
all right.
Because it's also not taking into consideration the possible expenditures, increase in expenditures
Right.
we might have with face masks, with
Correct.
bringing school back into session. So literally I thought it best just to keep everything
Okay.
consistent until
Right.
we have more information that, until we
Okay.
know more of the known versus the unknown.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. As far as slides 4 and 5, these are graphs basically for just an overview of where our money is coming from, what it's being spent on, the percentages and allocation for each of the pockets for the revenue and the expenditures. So for our revenue, we have 66% being collected in local revenue. So that is the property taxes, tangible personal property, and the school district income tax. The rest, the other 34%, is coming from the state. So that is our foundation money. That's the money that we get for each student. It's the rollback in the homestead. that the state makes us whole by giving the reduction on our property taxes. They're making us whole. And then all other could be open enrollment. When we had kindergarten payments, it was that. It's preschool tuition. It's all everything else combined in that. And this is all fiscal year 20 data that I was using. As far as the expenditures go, the bulk of our expenses are in personnel and fringe. That's not any great shock. It totals between personnel and fringe, which is the benefits for the retirement. You've got the SERS and the STRS. You have Medicare, workers' comp, and then the health care benefits, the health, the dental, and the life insurance. So those are the pockets that make up the fringe benefits. This totals 71 to 72% of our budget, but I do want to point out that if for some reason we lost all of our federal grant money, our IDEA, our Title I, all of that federal grant that we've got personnel sitting in, and we had to bring them back, it would be closer to 80%. If that money disappeared, that percentage would be. The next largest expense is our purchase services, which is our contracts. So that's transportation, that's Alpha Omega, that's our substitute teachers with ASOP. We've got our utilities in here and our professional development. So that's our next biggest pocket. Supplies and materials are the instructional supplies for our students, the maintenance supplies for our buildings, our transportation, fuel, and our textbook adoption. And I just want to do a reminder that our textbook adoption will cost us roughly $1.4 million. Our capital expenditures consist of any large equipment that has a life of at least 3 years. Our one-to-one initiative falls into this category, and any furniture or big equipment such as boilers, freezers, and vehicles. As a side note, our one-to-one technology is in this pocket, and it's going to cost us roughly $2 million over the next 4 years to replace or update all of our technology. The other category is our fees, so the auditor and state fees that we pay to manage our property taxes, our school district income tax. So the 800 object code, which is all other, is the fees and the dues. Any questions before we move on?
What percentage of the purchased services, 20%, is the transportation budget in your estimation?
How much is the transportation budget?
Well, what part of that is transportation? I guess I'm just wondering about a ballpark.
As far as a percentage?
Yeah.
It's about 2.6 million.
Okay. 7.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? So taking all that information and taking the information from slide 3 as far as how I updated the revenue to do the worst case scenario, slide 6 is giving us a broad overview of that revenue model. This shows in a nutshell our revenue and expense projections and how it will affect our ending cash balance. At the bottom of the graph, you're going to see our surplus or deficit spending. As you will see, our deficit trend that started last year will continue at an alarming rate. I would like to point out that seen as a standalone number, almost $22 million is a significant cash balance. No one's going to dispute that. But put in perspective, using the daily operations expenses of Talawanda, these funds would pay the school district's bills for about 7 months, or broken even further, 211 days. This is the number today, but when you look at the outlying years, it erodes pretty quickly. In 2023, would a business owner consider 43 days of working capital adequate cash on hand? Are there any questions? To get to the savings, because we did have some savings, the next slide, slide number 7, shows just a recap of some of the items that I do know of. So we've got savings of the textbook adoption, which is $75,721. We put the STEM bus on hold indefinitely. So that is still a goal, but based on the economy and where everything is going, we've decided to put that on hold. So that money will not carry forward for them to spend next year. They are basically giving it back. So that is a true savings. Transportation right now, we're looking at a savings of about $191,000. We do have 11 Calamity days in here. We are saving midday routes and spring athletic in the field trips. Fuel, we're looking at about $93,000 savings in fuel. So that's a big help. ASOP, remember, this is our subs for when the teachers are sick, take personal leave, or take professional development. This is based on last year's actuals. So it's not, I can't firm everything up until we close our books. But we are looking at close to a $72,000 savings. And like I said, this is based on fiscal year actuals, April and May. Elementary summer school, they decided not to do it. They've done it in the past, but this year they've decided not to do it. So that's close to $12,000 in savings. And based on the original contracts for Butler County and City of Oxford, we will save $55,720 in our school resource officers. So we will have some more savings, but I can't true up those numbers until we close our books. So this is just the knowns right now. Below that, you are going to see some of the known COVID costs as of right now, and it totals close to $40,000. So the net savings, though, is about $450,000.
And you said these are not figured into the projections?
They're not.
Okay.
They're not. I would rather wait until after we close the books and they are concrete, and then we can discuss it in July as far as these are our actual savings.
And I'd like to add, I think that's smart because we also don't know what next school year is going to look like, and we may need to purchase additional things to get ready for that. So we need to wait a little bit until it's further.
Right. To your point, there's a mass project going on that Holly initiated a couple of months ago, trying to get community members to make cloth face masks. If we don't get the 7,000 plus that we're needing for 2 for each staff member and then 2 for the student population, then we're going to need to purchase them. And the calculations that I've done, based on the purchase that we've already made and that we're waiting for, which are the medical grade N95 masks that are disposable after 8 hours, they're $1.50. So we're looking at close to $1 million just in masks. So thankfully we have Kiwanis just donated $1,000. We have a couple community members who in total have donated $1,200, and Kiwanis has written a grant for us hoping to get $3,000 in help. So we do have a very strong community that is really rallying behind us. They know our struggles, so I really appreciate that.
You let joint, just for everybody to know, with the other Butler County treasurers, that they all got to purchase at a cheaper price versus districts individually going by this. I want to tell you, doing that too, because we got face shields.
We have 275 face shields that I have been asking around, and so I've been able to get 275 face shields for free. They're sitting in the office right now. So, I mean, that's a savings. That's a big savings, because those face shields can go upwards of $10, you know, and they can be reused. Absolutely. Yes. So that's going to help our speech pathologists, anyone who's doing the speech and language. We've already had like 42 requests from teachers to have the face shields versus a face mask. So this is fantastic news in my opinion. So yes.
I want to thank you for your work.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. If I can get more, I'm going to get more. So with all that being said, on slide 8 is an estimated where I think we're going to land. This is taking year-to-date actuals as of June 4th, taking into account our encumbrances tied up in purchase orders. We're waiting for invoices. They are busy trying to work with the buildings in trying to close out purchase orders. If the item is not going to come in, we just need to close out the purchase order and not tie up that money. We have 2 more payrolls. We've got Medicare payments to make. We've got STRS, our retirement STRS and SERS to make. So this is taking year-to-date actuals plus the encumbrances that are tied up into purchase orders. Any other adjusting factors as far as expenses that are going to come on our foundation. And this is where I am projecting we're going to end in 2020. With that being said, it looks like we still have a deficit of $1.5 million. So I'm hoping that we can close out some additional POs, but we're not going to know that until our AP, our Accounts Payable Department, can work with the different secretaries in the different buildings and call on the vendors and see if we have any outstanding invoices. So, but where it stands right now, we're still going to be in the deficit. So,
And how much of that, excuse me, those COVID savings, how much of that is reflected in this? I would assume it's kind of built in there because it's money that we haven't spent.
It's
right?
built in, right? Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Shauna, are you also thinking about maybe some of those purchase orders could be delayed?
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Are you also thinking about maybe some of the purchase orders that are set to go but are not yet approved by June 30th could be held?
Can I get up and go and?
Yeah.
She's asking, can some of those purchases
These microphones.
possibly be delayed that haven't been purchased
It's not
by
turned up.
June 30th? Are we looking at delaying or not?
Yes, they can be delayed.
Right, right. So I'm thinking that perhaps with building administrators and secretaries, administrative assistants, if there are some out there yet that have not been signed, then perhaps we could hold those into our next fiscal year, July 1.
Correct. But if they have placed the order, I don't want to close out the purchase order.
Right, right.
Because then if we closed it, we would have a then and now for the next year, and that's a no-no.
Right. It's a difficult place to be in right now because we're not quite sure what we're going to need as far as instructional materials, for example.
Right.
And so we may need some additional things, which don't know at this point. So I was just, asking if that's a possibility to think about putting it into the next fiscal year.
It is, and they've already started their July 1 requisitions. We've set up the software program that they can do their July 1 requisitions, and it gets approved by myself and Ed, but then it goes into a queue so it doesn't get converted into a purchase order. So they're already starting to submit their orders and to start thinking about next year. Others are holding off because, as you said, we don't know what is going to happen for next year,
Right.
and they don't want to be having miscellaneous materials for the classroom if we're going to be virtual.
Right,
So
exactly.
they need a different set of items, a different set of instructional materials if we're going to be virtual. So a lot
Right.
of them are holding off on it.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? We're going to go to slide 9. And I know Mike has reviewed this with you, but I thought it would just be nice to review it again. These are just the definitions of what fiscal caution, fiscal watch, and fiscal emergency are. So fiscal caution is it's when the state declares a district in fiscal caution if the auditor of state certifies that our district is between 2 and 8% of the preceding year's general fund revenue. So the deficit, if the deficit is between 2 and 8% of the preceding year's revenues, they can declare us in fiscal caution. The only saving grace for us right now is that we do have that cash balance, and they have been taking that into consideration. But technically, we do meet fiscal caution because our expenses, our deficit spending exceeds or is in between the 2 and 8%. And right now, we are literally between 4.2 and 8%. Last year, we were 4.2, and this year, we're going to be 8.8% if everything lands where I think that we're going to land. And hopefully, I'm wrong. Fiscal watch is when the operating deficit exceeds 8% of the general fund revenue in the preceding year, and the district has not passed a tax levy to eliminate the deficit in the succeeding year. Our deficits are projected at 8, 14, and 10% in fiscal year 21, 22, and 23. So we would meet the definition of fiscal watch, but once again, we've got that cash balance, so that could be taken into account by the state and the auditors. Fiscal emergency, which is slide 11, is an operating deficit greater than 15%. So if the deficit is greater than 15% of the prior year's revenue, your district is in fiscal emergency. And at our current rate, I'm fearful that we might reach this at 23 and 24, fiscal year 23 and 24. And I want to stress, and I know that Mike has stressed this too, this is the equivalent of being basically bankrupt, filing Chapter 9. And this is when the state comes in, takes over your department, and takes over your school district, and they make every decision for you. So, you know, we don't want that. We do not want that. So slide 12 is what can we control? So the first one in slide 13, the biggest items are personnel and fringe. Personnel is 54% of our budget. When I took a look at the numbers, I worked with payroll, Holly, and I updated the fiscal year 19 FTEs. And based on her numbers, we have 389 FTEs, which is a full-time equivalent employees. We have increased that 23 versus the prior year. So with that, with the payroll increases, we are estimating at a 4% increase each year. So that is taking this year's actuals or last year's actuals and building it up 4% each year. That takes into consideration our last year we had a this year we had a 2.75% increase for our certified and classified. This upcoming year we have a 2%, and then the other 2% is steps being built in. So it's an overall 4% increase each year. With this increase, with the 4% increase, that will be about a $3.2 million increase over 4 years. The other big ticket items on slide 15 are, of course, our benefits, because they go hand in hand with our personnel. Like I said before, these are our retirement, our Medicare, and our workers' comp expenses. They equate to about 19% of the total fringe. So SERS and STRS, Medicare, workers' comp combined equate to about 19% of our fringe costs. The rest of it is our health care, dental, and our life insurance premiums. We've been pretty fortunate with our health care that we've had the larger pool of people, larger pool of school districts in our Butler Health Plan. We've been able to have some pretty good rates and to keep them consistent, but that's not going to stay. I think that the average for companies is a 16-17% increase each year. So they've been able to keep the cost pretty low, but we have budgeted for an 8% increase each year after fiscal year 21. So that is, once again, a big ticket item. That one is controlled by the union negotiated contracts. So right now we've got The certified and the classified contributing 17.5% for the medical premiums. The dental premiums, certified contributes 15%, classified contributes 0. So they get their dental for free. And life insurance is covered at 100% for all employees. So that is a controllable cost that we could negotiate with the two unions. The other 19%, which is the retirement, Medicare, and workers' comp, that goes hand in hand with our personnel.
And that's fixed, there's no.
That's a fixed. That's a fixed. Yeah. So are there any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. On the FTEs of employees, you said we jumped 23 employees from FTE from 2018 to 2019. And if I look at this, 16 of them were in the classified area and 7 in the certified. I'm trying to remember adding that many positions.
Well, at the top, you have to, it's not broken down at the top. So, at the top, it's yes.
Yeah, it's 245
yes, we
and
are.
120.
Yes.
So it looks like we added 7 and 16 for a total of 23. And I guess I don't remember, like since I've been on the board, the additions of staff I remember clearly are the SROs and the social workers.
That's a contract. That's not, the social workers is within ours, and they
Right.
can be certified, but our school resource officers are in the purchase services. They're a contract.
Okay, so
So
they
you're
aren't,
not gonna see
they
them
aren't
in here.
included in here.
They are not included in here. Any of our Butler County ESC personnel
Right.
are not included in this personnel. They're included in our purchase services, which is a contract.
So I guess I'm looking for clarification either now or later to where we jumped 23 basic full-time employees from 18 to 19. And if you can get that to me now or get that to me later, that seems like a large jump. And I don't know if that's in the way things were counted, and then they're in a different column than they used to be or what, but that seems like a large jump.
It is, and I know we had some jump with the. I know we had some jumps with the classified needs,
Okay.
so I know some of that, but I need to get back to you on these. We also did the van,
Yeah.
drive that, right, exactly. So I can name off a few off the top of my head. I
Okay.
need to go back.
Oh. All right. Yeah, I'd appreciate that.
And
Thank you.
I think once in a while, too, they were in the wrong category.
I think
Because that
so.
happened frequently. No, I shouldn't say frequently, but occasionally. So that somebody who was, and I know years ago, like they would have my guidance counselor in this category. Well, no, he fit into this category. And so sometimes that may be, there's a correction in 2019.
And our athletic director used to be classified, now they're certified. So there have been a couple of swings over the past couple of
Right.
years. You're right.
Right.
Yeah, but
Like
that
our-
would move them, that wouldn't change the
Wouldn't
overall
change the
total.
total number.
It's,
Right. We
but-
do
but I
need to go
see
back and
it's
take
a
a
matter of
look.
how to count.
I want to just say once again that this is based on the numbers that Holly Turner gave me. So there could be some duplication in here. We do need to take a fine tooth
Right.
comb with it, but I'm pretty confident on these numbers.
Okay.
We'll get back to you.
Thank
Yes.
you.
I just don't have the answer.
Yeah, I wouldn't think off the top of your head you could do it. It was sort of if you could get back to me, it would help me understand this. Thanks.
I actually have the reports right on my desktop that I can send and we can review together. Okay.
If you could share that with everybody, that'd be great.
Oh, absolutely.
Anything else? Okay, we're going to go over the performance audit, and we're going to do this slide by slide so that there can be some open discussion on each particular item. And then if you guys would like us, if you would like to direct us to do anything, we'll take the notes and then gather the information that you would like to see. The first recommendation is in our athletics. And basically, they are saying that they would like to bring back the pay to participate. Their first recommendation is in the area of extracurricular activities. In fiscal year 19, the board eliminated pay to participate, which equates to about $131,000 in revenue. Their next recommendation would be to take a look at reducing the supplemental salaries, the salary schedule, or eliminate programs.
Of course, when we reviewed this with the auditor, I don't think they talked about the number of sports. Kind of felt like the financial analysis. I don't think they did a thorough analysis as many sports each of our schools that they compare had. So maybe spending more, didn't look at participation, and I think there's a lot of understand what they're asking. But that wasn't what.
But I think also it was mentioned the fact that we do offer more extracurricular activities than any of our surrounding districts. Ross, for example. And Chris, I think you were on the board when we had the women's field hockey that came and, showed us how important it was, the number of young women that were going to participate and had participated. So, over the years, we have definitely supported having those opportunities. Lacrosse is another one. I pushed hard to get lacrosse because there were some young people, both men and women, who really didn't want to participate in some of the fall sports. But they, we got it started in the 7th grade here. So by the time they got to high school, there was nothing for them. So I agree, Chris, we do have more, but I think also that's one of the strengths of our district. So we do have to think about that. Do we eliminate or do we cut back on supplementals? But, the 131, we knew when we approved it that it was going to come back. And so, it's here.
And Dr. Roberts, I want to follow up that our athletic director, Wes Cole, also has done presentations over the last year since the board passed this, and there's been an increase of participation at each junction. So the fall, the winter, and the spring, and that right after the board graciously eliminated it. So we know that there probably was some cost factors in students joining multiple sports or sports with the pay to play. And I'm not saying that can't be eliminated, but I'm saying the intent by the board was fulfilled and it increased the amount of students participating in sport.
Well, and I think, we're certainly focused on the whole child. So as a result, and we also know that oftentimes with the extracurricular activities, it gives some young people a place to be and someone who is in a leadership position to support them. So, we have to think about all those other things as well that are not just a part of just $131,000.
I would like to also say that this is not just athletics, so extracurricular activities is any student activity. So it can be mock trial, Model UN. So it's all of those. It's drama. It's newspaper. It's all of the after-school activities that we offer our students. So it's not. A lot of people will think that it's just athletics. It's not. There's a wide, diverse set of opportunities that we give our kids.
And, because Dr. Thoreau just said, that Wes gives us a report. But we've not had, Becky, a report on the arts or those kinds of things as well. And I know, for example, we've got a Kiwanis Club, high school club here. That's just one of the many things that we do in Kiwanis that's here. So that might be a good thing for us to have that information Because theater, I mean, when you think about the number of students who participate, band,
I think all of us here recognize that statistically, students who participate in extracurricular activities, whether it's arts activities or athletics or civic participation, whatever it is, that we do have data, generally speaking, we have data that supports that those students tend to do better in academics as well, that extracurriculars and academics support each other. But I do understand, and I think we all feel strongly that, you know, pay to participate is a hindrance to students taking advantage of those opportunities. I think we also all recognize the fact that in terms of the public perception of what we're doing, we have to be able to explain this, and we have to be able to say, here's why this matters, here's how it affects our students, here's how we can justify continuing this if we are in deficit spending. And if we are in deficit spending, if we're in fiscal caution, we have to take hard looks at everything that we would like to keep. And we might have to think about how do we then approach this particular nut the same way as some other, you know, how much can we take out of this and still maintain those experiences, still maintain the value and the richness of what it is that this district offers because we support extracurriculars throughout.
and oftentimes, I know several of my graduate students have done capstones and followed a group of students. Attendance is a big piece as well. Because if you're not here, you don't participate. So, and if you're in the seat, we can teach you. So there are so many parts and pieces that I'm not sure. I mean, we understand, but I certainly agree with you. It's something that we could maybe share a little more.
Well, because it's difficult to generate the data specific to this school to be able to say, you know, look, here's the improvement in test scores since we eliminated pay to play. We really can't generate that kind of specific data, but that's what people are going to want to see, right? Is, well, you say it helps academics, but how do you know that? So how do we, again, it's that justification. How do we then talk about it? How do we present it? How do we justify it when we can't do that specific kind of data correlation?
It would take a big study to be able to do that.
It would, yeah.
There is literature connecting extracurricular involvement and school outcomes, right? Whether that's applying here, nobody knows. And it's certainly common sense that it's going to impact families who are lower socioeconomic status. And so of all of these recommendations, this is probably the one I have the maybe one of the most ones I have the least appetite for. So I think that we can maybe make headway on some other recommendations. I'd like to table this one, except for the piece about raising admissions and sales. I mean, maybe that's a way to make up some of this revenue. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know what that gets us. It probably doesn't get us a lot of revenue, but that's the one piece of this recommendation that I would be willing to recommend tonight. But the rest of this, I feel like we need more discussion and input. At least that's how I'm personally feeling right now.
You know, I had a conversation with somebody about the admission fees at football games because they were talking about, you know, there don't seem to be, you know, enough students and families and community members that come to football games. And I assumed that all students got free admission to the football games, but they don't. And when I realized that, again, the conversation then became, well, yeah, they're not going to come if they have to pay to come. So that's also a tricky part of this equation. I mean, yeah, we might generate more revenue in terms of ticket sales, but we might lose revenue if we don't get as many people coming because it costs too much.
Well, and I think the family pass is one of the things that a lot of families do use, but then again, coming back to a more specific segment of the population may not purchase a family pass.
Because they can't afford that family pass. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's 4 parts to recommendation 1, actually, and the first was bring back pay to play. I do not have a stomach for that either.
Right,
I think it's just too important for our kids to participate. There was another one that said increase admission and sales. I think that's a mixed bag. You raise prices, you might get less kids. And as a parent, well, if you're not paying to play, maybe they don't mind as much paying to get in as well. So that might not be bad. It also called us to maybe encourage the boosters to increase spending. I was hoping that would happen naturally when we got ready to pay to play, that the boosters would experience an income revenue source from people who weren't paying, but maybe were able to donate. So we might, if we continue without pay to play, might say to the boosters, you can be a fundraising organization because a lot of the parents could afford it and now don't have to. They can donate to boosters and take care of some of our academic needs. The part I think we could look at and maybe save a little money is the amount of things we often offer and the supplementals. You know, I think one of it is how many people participate. I don't know how many supplementals we have that are clubs, et cetera, and maybe some of them gain a lot of popularity and there's a lot of kids, and 3 years later we're paying a supplemental and 5 kids show up for some club occasionally. You know, like, I don't think that's a bad thing to have the administration look at which activities have what kind of participation, which ones maybe the interest in that activity has waned a little, and we could eliminate that without, and because students would still have other opportunities. I'd like us to look at that. I'd also like us to put ourselves in a position, as I said last month, that depending on how schools open, to make sure we aren't locked into our supplementals. If we open a school and say we're having a football team, and I don't know how many supplementals that is, I'll say 8. And if we hire 8 football coaches, because we usually have, 100 kids from freshman to senior year, and because some parents are nervous about playing, we have 40 kids. Because parents might not want to. I would like our supplementals to be written where we have an out that those assistants, I'm sorry, we don't have a job for you because of participation. Or if the season's canceled after game 2, that we have an out saying, we're not going to pay you the entire contract, we're going to prorate it. Because supplementals, in my opinion, it's not someone's livelihood as much as they like it. I'd hate to do that to a kitchen worker, say we're not paying you, or, because that's their livelihood, or one of our aides. But most of the supplementals are extra income, and I want to make sure we aren't stuck. If something comes up and we cancel again, or we have way lower participation rates, that we're locked into a set of supplementals and paying that money. That's something I think we ought to look at, just in case. And it might be we need all 8 football coaches, and that would be great if things were that good. But I think we got to keep ourselves a back door out, just in case.
So just to piggyback off, we have not brought forth supplementals for like football or sports that we don't know about at this point in time, or how we're going to open. I've been waiting to bring those forward. We've notified our associations, our unions. We've also notified our staff members about this. Because right now, some of them want to get busy and start conditioning and skills training, and we talked about this at the last time, and we have some of that going on right now. But we're waiting to see what happens, what the decision is for school, because right now, we don't have the authority, or the board doesn't have the authority to prorate a supplemental or change a supplemental once it's been issued. So that would be something that has to go through the negotiations process, and we are up for negotiations this next school year if we're looking at possibly asking for a change or changing.
That was a topic that Bricker and Eckler talked quite a bit about like a month ago. And that's why when you suggested at our last board meeting that we do what we did, because they also gave us a choice B and a choice C, which were probably not good ones, simply because it could have ended up in some kind of a lawsuit. And so, having to be careful, which really is a tough thing right now, because I know, they're, football in particular is planning on getting back, but it is what it is, so.
I think to speak to Pat's point, though, about you can't always predict participation, and the way the contract is written, now, there's no, like you said, there's no out.
There's no-
Again, as an adjunct instructor at Miami University, that is a big part of my income, and I've had several times over the last 5 years when I've had a class canceled 2 weeks before school started because there was insufficient enrollment. So I think there's precedent in terms of hiring contract for that kind of clause, that kind of out. We're offering you this contract conditionally on participation.
Not currently,
to be
because
a-
it's in our collective bargaining unit. And Dr. Roberts is correct. I mean, we were on
Right.
the same thing. We had the attorneys, not the way it is written now. And we're not the only district that's going through
No.
this issue. Everybody's going through, even with
Right.
transportation, which is another issue that coming up. So that's something that would have to be negotiated because it is actually in the collective bargaining agreement.
So you could not get a memorandum of understanding?
We could. I can tell you that I have asked for one, and it was not, at that point in time, we had asked for a rated earlier for this school year, and that was not.
Wait, what did you just ask?
We could get a memorandum of understanding with the union to say, this year, we're going to allow this to happen in this way.
Okay.
You've asked them?
I asked them for this past school year to prorate it, and they weren't interested
Well,
in doing
okay,
that.
I'm
I
talking
have
about
not
going
asked
forward.
for going forward, and I can ask them for doing that.
Yeah, I would prefer you ask them and see, because otherwise, do we have the option, if we get a set of supplementals and there's 8 football coaches, we can approve 4 of them and not approve 4, and just, we can wait till a game into the season to see if they get more. Gee, and I'm the union guy.
Well, they wouldn't start unless they're offered to. So
Yeah.
if you're talking about that, MOU would have to be in place before.
Mhm. And Pat, coming back to talking about increasing Booster Club spending, they've got to make money first.
Right.
And I know I was here for the spaghetti dinner that they had during a basketball game, and they had such little participation. They had it worked all together, and Bonnie had
Right.
organized, and, they had cakes and all kinds of things. So,
Right.
and their president this past year at the Athletic Boosters was a go-getter.
Mhm.
Yeah.
She
Yes.
worked really hard, and our band boosters work hard as well. They're always out there selling items and that kind of thing.
Right.
So they really are working, but
Oh, yes.
sometimes it's just difficult to get that money in. But like you said, maybe people could be encouraged to
Just
give a
donate.
little bit since they don't have to pay to participate.
Right.
So, I mean, it's definitely worth a
Right.
thought,
Right.
I also wanted to throw out there that as far as increasing the ticket prices, that does not flow through the general fund. That flows through the athletic fund, which is a 300 fund. It has nothing to do with the general fund. So, and then they pay for the refs out of this. They pay for miscellaneous supplies and entry fees and that sort of thing. But so if they increase the price, that money will not flow through the general fund. It's a 300 athletic fund.
Well, and there are a lot of athletic events, clubs, sport, that do not charge.
I know.
Quite a few of them. And I know years ago, at least, hockey used to charge, and then they haven't been charging for the last couple of years. So, yeah. I mean, I guess that's something that maybe Wes would like to look into.
We need to look into that
because I know I used to buy a pass for hockey, have
Right.
grandkids playing.
There's something with OHSAA too in setting prices or charging too, which I have a vague recollection that we talked about this a couple months about it, that as a group in our league, we're committed to charging certain prices too. But again, I need to check back in on that, and I'll ask about this as well.
Yeah, because I know, like, when I go up to Olentangy for hockey or someplace like that, boy, they're charging me, $8, $10 a ticket. I mean,
Yeah.
and if it's a weekend, you could buy a pass for $15, but.
I would like to recommend that we talk to Mr. Coles about some of these ideas that people have put on the table as alternatives for pay-to-play. I just also want to say that I'm not interested in reinstituting pay to play now. But if we're staring down the barrel of fiscal watch, that I might get more appetite for it, and I don't. And so I think we need to be in a conversation with Mr. Coles, as well as boosters and other people who have been observing what taking pay to play away did for, particularly at the high school, and then is it worth it? Is it a commitment we want to keep? I mean, I think we need more information, and again, there's a lot more actionable items here that we can look at tonight. But I'm just saying I wouldn't take it off the table altogether just because we're going to have hard choices to make, I think.
So just to clarify for my own understanding too, pay to play or pay to participate, those fees do go through the general fund?
Yes.
So it sounds like what we're talking about, these other things, the ticket prices and that kind of stuff, that's not really going to make a dent in the deficit anyway.
No.
So, yeah.
It's two different buckets.
They're two different,
basically.
yeah, so, again, I think it's still worth looking into, but it's not the kind of thing that's gonna, budge our budget.
So think of it this way, the general fund can pay for anything.
Right.
The 300 fund and anything that is a 300, 200, 018 cannot be moved into the general fund to pay for items. They are a separate fund, they're a separate entity, basically. Yeah.
I think there's an argument to be made against increasing gate prices too, because if we get more people in seats at plays and basketball games, then we get more community support for schools. And so,
Yes.
and that's soft, you can't count that, but it's important stuff. And so I don't know that given what we know about where the money goes, and given that community support is one of those intangible goods, there may not be anything here that's worth pursuing, except, as Pat said, maybe shrinking, figuring out if there are places to trim in terms of the supplementals and, I don't know, sports that are or activities that are underutilized or whatever.
So I think would also be helpful is if we could look at what the cost is for each of the sports.
Mm-hmm. So every year I do an athletic analysis, and so after the year ends, I will be asking for the athletic participation, the band participation, and I will be putting the numbers together into a spreadsheet. So that I do that every year. So it's just not going to happen until after we close the books.
I understand now. The other extracurricular activities we talk about now, are there supplementals associated with those?
Yes.
That would be good to know the cost for those extracurricular activities also.
So what I have is that we are going to take a look at all the supplementals, contracts, who is in what, and how many kids are participating in each. That's what I have written down as far as an action that we need to take. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Sounds
Can
good.
you look at the number of kids in those activities and how much those activities then are costing?
If there's a due or a dues or fees, registration associated with it, yes.
Okay, well, I mean, how much is coming out of the general fund for that activity?
Yes,
Right.
yes.
So if we've got 10 kids in an activity and that activity is taking a bunch of money,
We can have it look very similar to the athletic analysis that I do, so that we put in how many kids are participating, how much we can put, because each one has a 200 account, it's a 200 student activity, how much that is bringing in as far as revenue and expenditures, and then how much it's costing the general fund in salaries and fringe or any other incidentals.
Right.
So we'll model it very much like the athletic one.
okay, yeah, that would be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I have one other question. If we were to raise the price of admission, was to generate, could you move an expense that was normally paid from the general fund, pay that from the athletic fund?
We could. So what is being paid out of the general fund for athletics right now are busing to get to the away events, the salaries and the fringe associated with the coaches, and we allot $10,000 to the high school athletics for uniform. There's a uniform cycle. So if they start raising enough money, then technically we could ask the athletic fund, West Cole's budget, to pay for those uniforms if need be. And then the middle school athletic department gets $5,000 every year for uniforms. Same thing, it's in a cycle. And then the band department gets $10,000 a year.
Not that I'm recommending that.
What's that?
I'm not recommending that, I just wanted to.
You just want, it was information. Mhm. Are we okay to move on to recommendation 2 and 3? Okay, so the next two recommendations are taking a hard look at the personnel. Both of them, the first recommendation is the administrative and administrative support staff. The reduction in staffing, they've given their thoughts and opinions on that, and it could save Talawanda an average of $407,000 per year. We can, take each one of these as an individual, or we could group the personnel together. What would you guys like?
I feel like I don't really have a strong sense of how, and this is not the right word, and I'm sorry I can't think of the right word right now, how valuable each of these people are in their positions. That, I don't trust that we really know those 2.5 FTEs in building office support staff, how important those jobs are, how
And what it
are
would
those
look
people,
like?
what they look like, what will happen if we don't have those? If those go away, how does that impact what's happening for administrative staff? So I think I need more information about what this really means, how many of these people there are, what they're doing, how, the people who are dependent on these positions feel about something like this. So
And I look at it and wonder too, okay, if we say we don't want to take all of these FTE, let's say we want to take say we want to just say 2.5 FTE out of this, how much does each FTE cost us? I don't think it has to be an all or none.
right.
It could be something where we can look at each cost.
So is this something, Ed, that is coming from your office, or is this looking at each school, the staff in each school?
This is district-wide at buildings as well, because the 0.5 FTA building administration is, when you look at the audit, that is us having an assistant principal that's more. So when we're doing the comparison with other groups that are spending less than us, that they did not have as many principals, assistant principals, and it's at the high school, for instance. Audiovisual staff, who is public relations, is our communications director, and building office support is like our clerical type of support, administrative type support. And central office administration, I believe that is the treasurer's department. That's one over in that
I could
one.
not find that spelled out,
So
honestly.
there's I'm
I
sorry.
know that it's board office in Nelson Morrow, but I could not, in any of the notes
when we
that I
sat,
had.
when we sat in the meeting and talked, it was the board treasurer's office that they said we were over one person at the treasurer's office. So it's a combination of that. There's
Compared to
others that
other
are coming up,
districts.
like teaching and learning and stuff like that on the next page. But
If we look at them one at a time, it'll help me because we're jumping around. I'm slower than the rest of you. The central office administration, it says cut one position. I assume that's one of the 7 people that you have 2 coordinators and 5 directors. They called it in the audit.
Correct.
I assume that's your curriculum directors and your human relations, et cetera. I don't think that's treasurers.
I don't believe so either.
So they think we can get by without one of those, like it seems like your administrative team there.
so I need to go back and look at the audit, because I know they said at the treasurer's office it was one person that they were over.
It
As
doesn't-
for, I know for and I didn't know if it was on the next one, for instance, teaching and learning, we know that we comparable to others paying less, we are over by like 2 staff. The way this is broken out is a little bit different than what's in the audit. Not that it's anything different, but if you go into the audit, it will spell it out more. Click to the next one. Recommendation 3, 1.5 curriculum specialist. That's the teaching and learning staff. On the next slide, 19.
So have there been any conversations with the people
Whoa. Sorry, I'm going to get up
in
and
these
move.
positions?
So we can turn the lights back on.
7th inning stretch, right?
There you go.
Yeah. Have there been conversations with the people in these areas, in these departments about, can you find, a half of an FTE somewhere?
Yes, we have had conversations about that. So yes, my recommendation would be that the board give me a direction and Shauna a direction to say, for instance, we're looking at, and I don't know if this is the right time because we still have many unknowns.
Right.
And this audit is old, to be honest with you, so there's some issues with it, even though it was done in January. I get it. Things have changed tremendously. But such would be, we're looking for cuts in personnel, making it up $100,000, whatever that number is. When we're doing retirements and rehires, we're looking at a savings of $100,000. I'm looking at the board, and then we would come forward with ideas and recommendations, and then we would use this audit to help spearhead some of that conversation, but then also be able to explain to the board and the community, okay, we're recommending that this position not be filled, or this position is going to be changed to a half, exactly what you're asking.
Mm-hmm.
I think going one by one, we can do that, but there's a lot of unknowns at this point in time, and I think if you cherry pick it, so to speak, what could happen is you unintentionally create an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So I would think that the board would want to put it on to me and say, and Shauna, hey,
Mm-hmm.
can you come up and you explain what that would be, what direction? And again, it's all with the level of services that we want to provide at Talawanda. We were just talking about like the pay to play or play to participate, offering all these sports. We know it's great for students. It keeps them engaged. They shine. They do leadership skills that they wouldn't have done. So does Talawanda want to keep that level, or does Talawanda want to do something a little bit less? Mm-hmm. That would go the same with administration that's in here. That would go the same with teaching and learning. And we can give that presentation and recommendations to the board.
And you did that. We asked you to do that when you first came. We gave you a certain amount and said,
Yes.
you need to find this. And that was not easy. I do have a question.
Sure.
How do we have a half of a curriculum specialist? I know we have one full curriculum specialist, but is somebody...
Great question. So remember, they're comparing it to another school. So that school might have had 1.5. Does that make sense? So we are over the amount or that they would have. So they could have a half, or they could have one more and less than us. So what this is saying is we have, example with it, we have 2.5 full-time, I'm going to go with counselors, more than what here that is being compared to. That would be the same with social workers, 2.5 more social workers, 1 teaching aide more, 4 monitoring. Does that make sense to you, Dr. Roberts?
Sort of.
Yep. So in the
but
appendix, it's
let
in the
me-
appendix, yeah.
Okay. One of the other things that I'm looking at on here, because, obviously we...
Appendix, it shows that we have, according to them, 2 curriculum specialists, and the schools we're compared to have, 0.69 and an average, which means some of them have none, And so we have 1.68 more than them, so let's cut 1.5. It's just sort of their math in the appendix. It's all listed how many people they have. That they classify our people in those positions. I don't know who put them there, because I didn't realize we had an audiovisual specialist to cut a half of a job, but I obviously don't know all 300 and however many jobs there are here. And so it comes out weird to cut 1.5 person or a half of a public relations person.
I just don't know how we could cut that half.
Yeah.
Cut her or him in half.
I think if we move forward, asking Dr. Thoreau to provide a list of cuts, we could identify a dollar amount, we could ask him to rank them in order. I think we'd get rid of the discussion about the half FT
Yeah.
and the three-quarter FT.
Go ahead, sorry.
And in the past, where I've worked at other institutions, when we've talked about budgets, it's not uncommon for them to say, we are going to cut X amount of dollars. We will give that to you, to the administration, to decide where you're going to cut and how that will least impact. I think that would be a good approach. Now, I say that too, and I think Dr. Thoreau makes a good point. We don't know where we're going to land in the fall. This is a good working document to look at. I think it's a good exercise for Dr. Thoreau to start looking at preparing ideas where we could reduce our budget. I don't think we're at a stage yet in this process of waiting for the budget from the governor to decide where we're going to land that we can actually say, we're going to cut X amount of positions, we're going to eliminate the pay to participate. I just think we need to, that's the step we need to take next. I think it's still good that we review this audit.
Absolutely.
Look at these and see if some of these are still applicable.
Well, and furloughing at this point could be another piece, because that's on the table. And again, that would have to be some kind of an MOU with the, excuse me, our unions, but it's a possibility. So again, depending on where we're going within the next 2 to 4 weeks, that can impact definitely this recommendation number 3.
So, and the other thing I just want to bring up, we would work on those that we would bring to the board, but understand too, what this audit didn't look at report card, didn't look at any of those performance indicators with it. And the reason why I'm saying that is, for instance, the gifted and talented teachers. Right now, we are not meeting the metric on the report card for gifted and talented, because we don't have enough gifted and talented teachers to provide all of the sessions that are required to meet that metric. And that's fine. We understand that. We're not making it now. By reducing it one more person, definitely we won't make it.
Right.
But, and maybe that's okay. Maybe that's the level of service that we're okay with. But I agree that we could bring it back to you and prioritize ideas for each of you, and then we can have that discussion.
Well, and gifted and talented has several models. So we still could perhaps meet it by changing the model that we're using.
We have so many kids identified. That's our issue. But I understand what you're saying. On the metric on the report card, we've looked at trying to change it so that we can meet that metric. But again, that's here or near. We could bring that forward. But I just want people to understand there may be unintended consequences or consequences we know about it. We make those choices because that's the level that we have to do to balance the budget.
And that's when I asked you to, and thank you, Chris, for what you contributed there too. When I asked you if we'd had these conversations, that's kind of what I was getting at, and he got at it, I think, a little better. Are we having these conversations? Are we looking at these things before we get to a point where we have to say, you have to eliminate $2 million worth of positions? So that, I guess that's what I was asking. Not, again, I don't want to get into this position of the board saying, let's get rid of this position, that position. That's your call. But are we doing that already in a way that is less intrusive on our part. And I guess I'm trying to say, we're trying to avoid getting to that point of saying, hey, look, bottom line, you've got to get rid of this much.
I can tell you that we have had discussions. We have made cost reductions,
Yes.
such as, we're going into next school year with the 20% with our building and budgets reduction, which this stuff is not getting us out
Right.
of this spending deficit that has been ongoing for many years. And I'm not blaming anyone because it's nobody here or a former board. It is the way school funding is. And I keep
Right.
preaching to this that we've got to fix it. When we're only receiving $1,400 per student, that's a problem. Where other school districts are receiving so much more. And they classify Talawanda as a rich school district because we are land rich in the sense we have a large amount of land. Doesn't mean that everybody's wealthy and can afford that, but it's the same thing when we just lost our $751,000. We lost more than any other district in Butler County. Why? Because we are considered wealthy and they believe our community should pay more for it. And just with the levy cycle to fund your schools, Talawanda's been very fortunate. The boards and the superintendents and the treasurers have done a great job of managing money to get that carry up. But now, over time, it's made so that you have to keep going back and asking your communities, if you want to keep that level of services, you got to pay more money to it. And it's been a while since we've done that. But you're seeing school districts that are doing it every 3 to 5 years, which is not something that we want to get into. So yes, we have been doing stuff. Just as Dr. Roberts said, we've been using like our wellness money from last year, which was some thousand, but $200,000 and $113,000 for when people retired or left and we rehired them at lower. The board had asked me to try to get to that 200,000 mark last year. I couldn't hit that with retires and hiring back at lower rates because we didn't have many people that retired last year. This year we have. This year we have a bigger amount, and this year we're looking at, and people leaving, about $517,000 worth of savings. So we are doing some of that. Yes, we're going to have to dig in deeper because what's going to have to happen is we're going to have to make a decision and prioritize. This level of support and what we're doing right now, if we want to continue that and the community wants to continue that, we're going to be out of money by about 2023, 2024 in that area. If we make some decisions now or throughout it, we can stretch it out. But I don't want people to think that this is going to last us forever. It just isn't unless they fix school funding and how we are classified. So we will be coming back for like an operating level. We can't use capital funds. That's the other thing that people don't understand. Well, why are you building Marshall, for instance, when you're looking at this type of well, you can't use that pot of money for the operation. I don't know that community understands. I know you all understand that there are different pots of money and you can't use it. But if you don't use that capital money, and when your name comes up to get those capital improvement monies with it, if you don't use it, you move back down to the bottom of the list and you got to wait your turn to come back up in some cases. In some cases, the money just sits there, but it can only be used for buildings or renovations and stuff like that. So again, helping the community understand the differences, the level of services. So yes, I'm in favor if the board comes and says, this is what we need you, like a dollar amount, let me come back, and then you can say, that is something we want to do, or no, that's a leveling that we do not want to give up at this point in time.
I want to ask, are we talking about asking for some of these cuts for the 21 school year, or are we asking for plans for the following school year?
Great question. And that could be, you could set it up either way, for both ways, one way. I will tell you that we're also negotiating this year going into it.
Right.
So there are things in here in this audit that are really collective bargaining unit, and I'm not saying that we're going to get it or not get it, but there's things that we can't touch because it's already agreed to.
contract,
But those contracts end the end of this coming school year.
Yeah,
So
that-
yes, and it could be a leveled system too.
Yeah.
Exactly what you're saying, some for the following year and the next year, and absolutely, we want to try to stretch it out as much as possible, as long as possible to go forward.
Okay, I want to make a couple comments. I had emailed Matt Rand a couple graphs. I think Andy has them, but he doesn't need to pull them up. Maybe we can attach them to the minutes, and it's from the auditor, and it showed how many schools have surplus and how many schools do not, and it showed, and this was pre-pandemic, how over time, the 40 schools that are in deficit, in 2019, by 2024, it was going to be 600 schools. And then it showed who had surplus, and that was going to go from 400 schools down to nobody. And the two graphs would show the public that we have a state funding problem. And what we're doing here is going to put a Band-Aid on us for a while, but either the state funding problem gets fixed, or we have to ask the local people for more money. The other thing in the audit, they compared us to school districts that spent less than us. So the audit is a dumbing down. It is a, who spends less than you, you need to get there. There's a political background to the audit. When we asked them to throw in the other university towns that have large swaths of land that are university-owned like Athens, we spend $2,000 less per pupil than those districts, but our local taxpayers contribute a lot more. They get, those other university places get a lot more from the state and the federal government. And so unfortunately, for reasons you mentioned, our local taxpayers are getting it put to them.
Yes.
But now I want to go back to recommendation 2 and 3, which I think are going to be the hard ones.
Yes.
Because that deals with people and people's livelihood. And I think maybe Chris's point is good. We have to come up with a number, unfortunately, and then let Dr. Thoreau and Shauna and the administrative staff work it out. And if you look at the two of them combined, it's asking for $2.3 million per year.
Correct.
But when they did that audit, pre-pandemic, it would leave us still with $21 million by the end of 2024. And our goal should not necessarily be to have a pocket full of money. Our goal should be to provide a good educational product in a responsible way. And so I think I doubt if we can say, come up with $2.3 million in personnel cuts by next year and not affect our product. I don't think that's possible. Of that $2.3 million, you mentioned we already have $500,000 from retirements that are already in. And so that pulls us down.
How much?
We have $500,000 savings because of people already who have retired, and so that brings that down a little. So if their goal was 1.8 million, so we had a big bank account, where do we set a goal and say, can you find, another 400,000 this year, 500,000, and then how do we come up with that number? But I think that's what we have to do, is what Chris said, come up with a number, and I don't know if anybody's put any thought into what that number ought to be.
I've been thinking similarly, but I've been thinking like, what would a million look like? I mean, try to get to $1 million between recommendations 2 and 3 over the next year, or planning for that. But I don't know. And given how fast things are changing with the virus and what we might need for that. So this would be more of a planning directive than going out and letting anybody release from contracts or anything. But I think, I agree with everything you said. The funding formula is broken. Yeah. But at the end of the day, we're the ones that are going to be put into fiscal, whatever the next category is, and it's on us. So we have to, we can't wait for the state as usual.
I think we could model what it would look like if there was 200,000, 300, pick the number, year one, could be next year or the year after, then the following year, whatever that amount is, and see what that does with our overall balance. How do we get the line not going like this, but it's like flattening the curve, so to speak, so that you can get it to last longer.
We can.
What's that?
That'd be pretty easy to do.
Well, and we really can't do a whole lot till we negotiate again.
You are correct. I mean, negotiations
So we
is a
have
huge part.
until next spring. And to your question, Kathleen, I mean, to do anything for 2021, no. I mean, but it has to be a part of the planning so that we can be fiscally responsible to look at these recommendations from your perspective and then kind of see what happens for us this fall. Because that's going to be the big piece right now. That's the unknown.
And Dr. Robertson, all of you are correct on this. You pick a number, I'm going to say it's 200,000, and then we find out that we start school and they require social distancing on the bus, for instance, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, where we can only transport 11 kids on a bus. Well, we transport 2,200 kids daily. How do we do that? It doesn't work. That would only give us about 330 kids that we could transport a day. Or we start, everything's fine, and then we get closed like we were closed the last time and have to do more online. And I'm not going to say that our online experience was bad the last quarter, but we definitely want to beef it up. And we definitely know that we are going to have to ensure all kids have access to the internet if we have to go online, and that's expensive as well. So I agree. It's kind of like dropping a pin and you're hoping it lands, but I'm not so sure what's going to happen this fall.
So do you need us to give you a range right now, or are you just comfortable with going back and looking at these two recommendations and coming back to us? What works?
So I will continue to look at the hires and rehires and keep moving in that direction because I think that's important. It's also important to get quality people in there. When people leave, we will also look at do those positions really need to be in existence or not. We will start having conversations. We have a leadership meeting next week or the week after. It's
Next Tuesday, I think.
And we were talking about some of this, but also some of what possibilities might look like, because again, we're also trying to reduce the expenditures as much as possible for things that we need to do as well. So I'm talking double here because I really don't know. I think next year will be a better way for us to start saying, 200,000, 300, whatever that number is, and working towards here's the list, here's its priority, and here's what it will do or not do. I don't know about right now because I'm afraid right now we're going to find out that Governor ROD cuts us another 10%, just like what they did in May and June for that 751,000. That could happen. Well, we were lucky that we're able to make up some of that with some of the cost savings that we've done, the purchasing, seeking donations, getting community involved. So we've been able to mitigate some of that, but it could be another big problem. And the governor has been, while I appreciate his leadership, he does not want to touch the rainy day fund, and he's made that clear.
When do you think the governor will have his?
So,
2 months after.
anybody that's been listening, I don't know. It's end of June, but right now he's a little bit, in my opinion, this is just me talking, a little distracted. I think that there's a lot going on in Ohio as well as the country and nation and world right now that's being a focus. I'm not saying that it's not important for him to be working on this, but he's working on that. And then there's the racial injustice and fixing that. But I also think of reopening businesses. I think he's trying to play it safe. and he wants to see what 3 weeks or 2 weeks will look like before he does schools, because we're opening this up, and if we see a huge increase in the pandemic, that may change his decision or the health department's decision. ODE is released some draft statements, and they had a board meeting about coming back to school. And some of their recommendations were social distancing on the bus, social distancing in classrooms. We can do that. However, with a territory of 144 square miles, we are not the same as a school district like Ross. It's much smaller and has less transportation needs. We are already at an hour route times. So the two biggest challenges, in my opinion, right now is bus, what we can and can't do, and the social distancing in the classrooms and how many kids we can have. We've measured the classrooms. We can fit in anywhere from 8 to about 15 kids. We have some rooms that are bigger than other rooms. And that's not including some special ed classrooms. We have some special ed classrooms with wheelchairs. We're only going to be able to get in 2 or 3 kids because of the medical needs that they have and the social distancing with that. But we can figure that out if we had that guidance and direction. So I'll explain a little bit later when we come to that, some of the 3 options that we're looking at, because I know families want to know. They want to be able to prepare. We understand as a school district that you need to make preparation for your children. We also know face-to-face classroom experience is the best learning. We absolutely know that. We want our kids back. But we're just not sure of the recommendations, and I don't want to give a false hope for anything that could be taken away at this point in time.
So do you, going forward with this meeting, do you think we should continue looking at getting through the audit recommendations, but then also having and creating other requests for information that might be generated from that? But then at the same time, realizing that you're going to have to start looking at budget, start to think about what cuts you may have to make. Of course, it was easier in the past where we could just say, Dr. Thoreau, we want you to cut $400,000. Now we have to say, we have to wait, find out what's going to happen. Governor, impact on our budget, the fall is going to look like. So for now, I think we just we go through this, we give Dr. Thoreau recommendation that he starts looking at possible cuts. Dr. Howard's idea of talking to staff, getting their suggestions from this is a good idea to get their input. So, that being said, everybody agree to that?
I think that idea of talking to the staff too, I think oftentimes these decisions are made without input from the people who are impacted by them. And so having that, making sure we're doing that, as you said, you've been having those conversations, just saying we're not just unilaterally making these decisions, we're asking you how it's going to impact your job, how it's going to impact your department or your school. I think that's important.
I think Dr. Roberts have to wait before we can really make a decision to find out what the fall is going to be like. Don't think recommendations need to be brought forward at the next board meeting. He can keep gathering data. It's going to take all that together. So if he can work on that, he and Sean are together to come up with costs. Later date when we have a better idea where we're going to, what our next step.
But I think also, in addition to talking to faculty and staff, I think the unions are going to have to be a part of that discussion, because that contract is very specific as to what and who and how things can happen.
You are correct. You are correct about that.
You know, that's going to have to be a part of that conversation for sure.
And I personally think we have to be talking about cuts in this upcoming school year. You know, if I look at Shauna's number, you're talking about a $7.8 million deficit next year. I don't think we can wait till the next year. I think we got to say, what can we do this year before we renegotiate? And then if it's still as bad as it is, then we have to think about how to renegotiate. But I think we got to look at cuts right now, obviously I hope it doesn't affect, or it should not affect our educational product, and I'd prefer to do it through attrition, and things like that.
Well,
But
there
these
are
two papers, that's 35 jobs right there to save that. That's almost 10, that's over 10% of your staff. I can't imagine cutting 10% of your staff and delivering the same education. I can't see how the auditor thinks that would happen.
Well, there are some big ticket items,
Yeah.
and that's what you had mentioned. You had 2 items on there. One was big ticket. We haven't gotten to the big tickets yet.
Correct.
So we need
Correct.
to move on, I think.
Yeah.
Correct.
Do we want to provide a number now, or just leave it general fines and cuts?
I think, I would suggest that we just leave it general, find some cuts. I think Shauna was talking about modeling this different cuts and what the impact would be.
Give me a dollar figure to work with, and I can do that.
She wants a dollar figure. She wants a dollar figure, don't you?
To do the modeling, yes. I mean, I'm going to have to throw in some numbers. So to do the modeling, I will need some numbers.
Which brave soul wants to throw out a number?
So you're asking for, you want us to give you show us model how we can reduce by $500,000?
What will this look like if we, take out $500,000? How is this going to look in fiscal year '24? If we do $500,000 in personnel, that also touches then the benefit side of it. So you're touching 2 items. It could be that you decide that we don't, we take a 1-year break on the one-to-one initiative and make do with the devices that we have for 1 more year. That could save money.
So are we thinking, we could do it in increments? We could do a 500, a 250, a million? Would that get you started?
I think, what about giving us an estimate of 500,000 that would be potential for, you're saying 21, but Mary Jane was saying earlier that we're not, I don't know what we can do in 20, so that's one of my questions, or the upcoming fiscal year. But I also think that in the second phase of it, where is $500,000 more dollars? It's to get us to $1 million, to look at $1 million and what $1 million would look like cutting over the next year. Hoping that we wouldn't have to do that and the General Assembly and the State House magically fixes school funding in Ohio.
Don't hold your breath.
Right.
Exactly.
It's been how many years?
Yeah,
21?
you're exactly right.
21
What
years or
if we have Wes Cole take a look at the supplementals for the coaches? Are all of the assistants needed? I don't know the ratio of coaches and assistants needed for how many, students there are. Are we at the optimum time? You're at the optimum number. Could we reduce it a little bit? That could, take a little bit of the money without affecting the education.
Yeah.
So we could have him take a look at and do that analysis for us. So maybe we don't need 6 football assistants. Maybe the recommended is 5. Well, that's 1. Then we could.
And could that be part of Dr. Thoreau's list of cuts eventually that we could be looking at?
The
And-
problem with going after supplementals, they're so small compared
agree.
to when you're looking
Right.
at the administrative staff
It's a small
or the
ticket
teaching
item.
staff. It's so small compared to, you could cut 20 supplementals and get $50,000.
I know.
They're not that big.
You're right, Dr. Roberts.
So that would be 1 FTE perhaps.
It's going to be personnel.
Yeah,
I mean, when
it
you're
is.
talking about
Personnel.
71% of your budget being personnel, that's how you get to the cuts.
Because you're talking bennies as well, so you're talking 19% on top of
Right.
whatever that is. So I agree, Becky, that,
Right.
we probably have supplementals that could be taken away, but if we're looking at modeling for $500,000, it's kind of a drop in the bucket compared to an FTE.
Yeah.
Oh.
So did you get numbers?
I have 500,000 to $1 million as far as doing two different modelings.
Yes.
500 to what?
It's pouring out.
500 to $1 million.
Yeah, I would almost think, and are you looking at the, are we
up.
talking about the total and all the audit, or all the things, find us $1 million worth of cuts, or just, we want 500,000, we want to look at 500,000 in personnel, plus where else can we save money? Or are we just saying, find $1 million total out of all these things we're going to look at, or 500,000 total? Because 500,000 total, if you're going to be down 7 million next year, is not a lot.
Right.
I think we got to aim higher.
Right.
Sorry about that. I think we got to maybe look at 500,000 in personnel, and can we find 500,000 other places?
Well, then, are you saying,
And so really shoot for, let's look at $1 million, and then let's see what happens. We may not be able to do it because we had all these cuts in busing, and now we can't do it because of social distancing. Or we had all these cuts in personnel, well, now we can't do it because we can only fit so many kids in a room, and we may not be able to do any of it, and we may have to go in the hole and hope the pandemic goes away the following year. And then we can change that.
well,
But I think we got to shoot for $1 million total, half of it personnel.
now, Shauna, would we have to designate salaries and benefits, or could we just say it's going to be 500,000 and then we tie it into the cuts as we go through it? Say $1 million, I guess is what
If
Mr.
you're just giving
Mead's
us a
saying.
dollar amount, then we're having to decide how best to keep Talawanda running, to give the education to the kids, and what programs or people we feel are not important. So, and that's a very difficult, process.
I agree, but I guess what I'm saying is for the model, just to show us where it hits the bottom line as we go out,
Right.
we could use just a dollar figure. And what makes up that dollar figure, we determine at a later time.
I can do that.
All right.
Agreed.
Okay, are we good to move on to the next one? Okay. So the next recommendation was, this is more of a collective bargaining agreement, but this is a salary freeze for fiscal year '22. They knew that they couldn't touch fiscal year '21 because we have that agreement. But they are recommending for us to negotiate a salary base freeze in fiscal year '22, which could save the district almost $1 million over a 3-year period.
And we really can't do anything about this till next year
No, we
anyway.
can't. Right.
So,
And they knew that in the audit too,
Right.
because they said it.
right.
Which then goes into the second, or the fifth recommendation, which is the district dental insurance plan. We currently use Delta Dental, that's a tongue twister for me, and they are telling us that we could look for cheaper dental plans, or we could have the employees pay a higher percent, and currently they pay 0 to 15% of the dental premiums. Once again, this is a collective bargaining issue, and it would need to wait until fiscal year '22. Slide 22, we move to the recommendation on custodial staffing. And there is a main recommendation, and then there's 3 alternatives. The main recommendation is just to outsource the entire custodial operation, which could save $262,000 a year. The 3 alternatives, the first one is right-sizing in-house, which keeps our blended model, but has us reducing our Talawanda staff by 3.5 FTEs. This could save us approximately $163,000.
How much was that?
$163,000.
Thank you.
The second alternative is in-source, which means we bring everyone back in-house. We hire the 9 positions that are currently with Alpha Omega, And if we do that, then we could save $23,000. The third alternative is to insource and right-size our staff. So once again, we're bringing it in-house again, but then we're taking a look at, do we really need all of these people, and how can we shuffle them around? So by right-sizing our staff, we would only be hiring 5.5 FTEs versus 9, which could save us $182,000.
I like alternative 3. I'd like to discuss alternative 3 and the pros and cons of alternative 3 from the point of view of you guys, and especially you around, like, and I also think that all of this conversation is like in a non-COVID universe, because our cleaning costs, they have to be whatever they are, you know, and we're not saying, you know, the sky's the limit, but like, we can't budget on cleaning at this time. So this discussion to me is about, under normal circumstances, what should this look like? And so in reading this, alternative 3 looks very desirable to me, but I don't know what the educators think.
One thing that I want to say and remind us is we were going to have to purchase equipment to clean. The equipment that we have at the high school and at Kramer belongs to Alpha Omega. And those are costs that come up periodically throughout it. The second thing that we have to remember is if we take it on, we're also responsible for the supervisory part, substitutes, and any type of workman comp. All of that comes back to us that currently we don't have. So that's some of the cons for it. The pros, of course, is that you have Talawanda people in Talawanda buildings, if that makes sense. So you own that. And sometimes there is a community part of that. We have Mr. Hubbard here, too. He's coming in the back there, too. So the right size in-house staffing, too, with the amount of spacing that we have, it can be done. We pay more than what like an Alpha Omega or an outsource pays, as well as the benefits. That's why you're not seeing as much of it. And remember that cost will go up over time as a increase in steps. I'm not saying no to it. I'm just telling you that it's going to be an extra thing that the schools are going to have to take on and monitor, unless you wanted to hire like a business manager that oversees something like food services and that. And I'm not recommending that, because that's an additional cost, and that would wipe out any savings that we would have on it. Mr. Hubbard, would you like to add anything about in-house, bringing everybody back in the custodial side of it?
Yeah, I could probably talk for quite a while about this. Definitely think it's something that we need to look at. A lot of right size in-house staffing, like they said. The standards have come a long way, so saying you don't need as many custodians to cover so many square feet now in a building. This building's 180,000 square feet. So you don't need as many custodians as, per se, back. I don't even know how many custodians were here in the past. But, yeah, like I said, it's definitely, there could be a conversation about this before a decision has to be made. I would be more than happy to bring in some information or anything to share. I'm really not tired tonight because of lights and HVAC and alarm panels and everything else that's going on. But yeah, I would definitely be more than happy to sit down and have a conversation about it. See what the board, how the board feels about moving forward as we have. There's options. There's several options that we can look at. so, yeah, I'd be more than happy to discuss it in further.
But I think a couple of things that we've not talked about, and Ed did mention, is if we bring everybody back in, then we're totally responsible. So
Yes.
getting subs, evaluating, supervision, all of the benefit parts and pieces, which we're not paying right now.
That's what I say, Dr. Roberts, there's so many different.
Yeah, we have to look at,
different things to think about. Who's going to manage 5 schools of custodians? Who's going to be that guy
Yeah.
that oversees everything and make sure that that's all getting taken care of? There's so many different details that come into play with that, and that's why I said there's many options too. If the board so chooses in the future to look at some different options, there's different options that we can do too. Like Dr. Thoreau said, as people retire, do we bring somebody else? How does that look due to retirements and things like that? So there's a lot of different ways that can go with custodial, and I know it's been a topic. I've been here for almost 6 years, and I know that it's been just seems like it's been just a constant topic, and I really think that it would be worth taking and looking and spending some time on and really coming up with a long-term game plan, as far as that, because it's right now I think we have 12 of our own custodians left now. A lot of them could retire tomorrow. I mean, they're eligible or getting close to retirement, so I think it's really a good time to look. What's a good, solid, long-term plan that's beneficial to the Talawanda School District at the end of the day, the taxpayers, and the students and staff of the school district? I really think that it's a good time to start.
I think there's also, for me, there's also an ethical question. So, when you say, and as you said too, that we have to take on all of those responsibilities for those employees, well, we're okay with taking on all of those responsibilities for educational staff and administrative staff, but are we saying that we don't value custodial staff the same way? We don't think they deserve our energy and time and commitment to taking on those.
No, I'm saying that we don't have the staff, the administrative staff that oversees it to ensure that it's done correctly and accurately. And with that and taking it on, there are costs associated with it. So I understand what the audit is saying, but there are also the hidden costs that sometimes come up when people are injured. And unfortunately, due to the work that the custodians do, that possibly could happen. So, and again, if this is the direction that we want to move in, I think if we present more information and the board says, yes, let's all bring it in, let's all right source it, that we understand what that savings and what that means, and the level of care that will mean for us to have whoever manage the custodians.
It also sounds, if I'm hearing what you're saying, Matt, too, that we need to, there's lack of clarity right now in the direction, that we need to have this conversation. We need to come up with a plan so it's not, gee, what are we doing this year, what are we doing next year, that we understand all these pieces.
Absolutely.
And we come up with something that is going to work.
And unfortunately for the custodians also. I mean,
Right.
It's every,
Yeah.
they don't know. It's always, in a small group of people, like I said, we have 12 of them now, they would have some clarity. Everybody, the
Right.
school district, the administrators, everybody would have some clarity moving forward. Whatever that decision is, whatever that game plan is. And I think that, I truly hard hearts think that there can be a consensus brought with everybody that works for everybody. But I really think we need to look at that long-term game.
And I would like to have more of a conversation with you as well individually about what your personal and professional opinion is on this. I mean, it's, we're kind of sitting here saying we're going to make this decision, but you're the one who has to live with the decision. So I want to know more about, I want you to do this, or I would recommend that you do this. So I would like some clarity in that direction.
I'd like some clarity on the contract, since, is this something that could be done before we renegotiate it, the contract with the
No.
staff? Or is it something we have to go through next year anyway with Alpha Omega? So we have almost a year
We have a year to
to come
figure
up
this out.
with clarity. I personally would like to bring them back for a lot of ethical reasons, and I'd like everybody in my building to be a Talawanda person as much as possible. I know we'll be done building Kramer by then. I have great faith Bill can supervise anybody, because he won't have he might not have a building to babysit, and go through that process, and may have some free time. And so I think it's something we can have those discussions about and get information. And I think Bill's a very important person to be part of those discussions. But we can't do it next year anyway, apparently. So when we go to do it, Kramer's going to be about done. And if we bring him back, Marshall, thank you. We bring him back whether all 9 or 5.5, we still save some money from what we're doing presently. Also, if we have a number of people retiring, it's going to be like our 11 retirements this year. You know, the new people we hire in will be at the beginning of the salary scale.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Pat.
Yeah. And I know the 2 young people that work here, every time I see them, ask me, when am I going to be able to be a Talawanda janitor? And I said, that's not my call, but, and they're young. They'd be around a long time.
I want to apologize. I think I called you Matt. And you're Bill. I know that.
Yeah.
It was Matt.
He'll answer
answered
anything.
And you said Marshall was Kramer, so.
That's all
I
right.
mess up buildings, not people.
Yeah, this is going longer, so let's move
Okay.
on then.
So I'm just going to piggyback on Mr. Mead. We are tabling this for 1 year. We are continuing with Alpha Omega for 1 year because we have a strong relationship with them and we have had 0 complaints with them. They are willing to work with us on the cleaning demands next year. Anything that we need, they are willing. I've had a conversation to do what is necessary. So I don't want to destroy that partnership. So I would like this tabled until next year, and then maybe we can have the conversations. Bill can come up with a plan. We can see how negotiations are going, and we can just make a more educated decision versus making something a knee-jerk reaction, and, so we are tabling this until next year.
When
Okay.
we hope to get some savings out of redoing how we're doing it altogether.
Correct.
Okay.
This will be a year we can discuss it and get ready
Yes.
for.
We come up with a fantastic long-term plan and how to execute it during this year going forward.
I think a year should be sufficient time, so.
Fantastic.
What's that?
I said a year should be sufficient time to.
Yes,
to get
it should
to
be.
that. All right.
Okay, the next recommendation is transportation, the bus route. They are recommending eliminating 4 bus routes from our active fleet. We currently run 32 routes, and this would bring us down to 28 routes for a cost savings of approximately $229,000. And it would also increase the time that our kids are on that bus.
But it also sounds like this was, again, a pre-COVID recommendation.
You got
We
it.
can't do anything about
You
bus
got
routes
it.
right now.
You got it.
We can't.
So,
Yeah,
That's correct.
Yeah,
nice recommendation, let's move on.
Yeah, I would be in favor of this, depending on the COVID situation. I don't know if anybody's had conversations with Peterman about what the auditor recommended.
Yes.
Because one of the things they promised us was, we have some kids that ride an hour. It's not going to extend those kids out. Some of the kids that only ride a half hour might get extended out.
Yeah.
We're still going to stick with the hour limit. And if we can do that with 4 less buses and save, $228,000 a year, I'm in favor of that. But again, that depends on COVID.
I have not had
And
this-
have we had conversations with them? We have.
I have not had discussions on routes and how long the kids will be on the bus. My discussions have been financial, but Ed might be able to talk about
I have.
the routes. Mine
So-
has been 100% financial discussions.
I've had conversations with Mike Sokol. So yes, it would extend out, and there are some chances that the hour might be an hour, 5 minutes or something like that. But one of the things we've got to work on is not transporting open enrollment students, and also trying to make your one bus stop. We have lots of students that get off throughout the week at different spots. That creates issues when you're trying to fill a bus. If I'm riding bus 1 on Monday, and on Wednesday I'm riding bus 2, I've taken up a seat, but then freed up a seat. So those are some of the things, we're even talking about that with the COVID-19. If we have to do spacing issues, you've now taken away 2 seats. So those are some of the decisions that we have to make, and I think having a year to do that, to inform parents, if that's the decision or direction we go, you can only have one pick-up and drop-off location, for instance.
And we did that a few years ago. We had to do it because we had people every day going someplace else. And, you know, I'm loading buses at Kramer, and all of a sudden it's packed.
You are correct.
Because they're going to the Tri, or they're going to music lessons, or whatever. So we had to actually just say, can't do. Because it does impact. Now, we can't deal with it right now, because we have no clue who's going where, or if we can even bring you to school. But
Right.
I think it's something we need to think about.
I agree with you, Dr. Roberts.
So we'll just move on with transportation, I guess, then, right?
Yeah, I'm hoping that because transportation showed up in 3 different recommendations, it gives us, after the COVID thing is over, a stronger ground to renegotiate with them. I mean, it seems like, I hope that's worth something to getting these costs under control a little bit. But in the short run, we can't know that.
And they were talking about going to an 8-hour day versus a 6-hour day, which would save us a lot as well. So in that recommendation number 8, I know that was one of the conversations we had about that 6.5 hours or whatever kind of thing, which was really hitting us hard. So like you're saying, you know, there are 3 here, but that would be, to me, that's one of the big pieces to discuss with them.
And I know I've already talked to, and I know Mike Davis, before Shauna came, was really looking at those excessive costs.
Exactly.
That's more than the 6-hour day that they're trying to do. 30 out of 32 routes
Yeah.
had excessive cost
Yeah.
daily. That's the problem. And that is a big chunk of change.
Yeah.
And then COVID came, and we're kind of stuck in figuring that out until we get back into operating.
Right, so I would like them to come up with a proposal to reflect whether we change to an 8-hour day versus a 6-hour day, and then that would get rid of all the middays. I want to see what the cost difference is. I know the purpose of doing the 6-hour is so that if we don't need those extra hours, we're not having to pay for them, whereas if we contract for an 8-hour day, no matter if we're needing them or not, we're going to be charged for them. So there is a reason for going with the 6. There is supposed to be a cost savings to it, but we really
that
need
out.
to take a look at the midday routes to see how we can consolidate, are the midday routes necessary, that type of thing.
And it could be a combination of 8 and 6 hours, if that makes sense. Some are 6
So
and
some
some
routes
are 8.
are, yep, okay.
Don't we also have a change now because we brought our own preschool back, that we are not going to have those, as many midday runs?
So, yes.
So that's going to impact it as well.
Yes. And that transportation was between middle school and high school route and elementary going to school.
Right.
So that's eliminated, which
Right.
gives us the ability to move that to a later start time. So by squeezing the time a little bit, maybe there is more opportunities to ensure no excessive cost beyond the 6-hour or 8-hour. Yes, I
Right.
think that's what we need to look at, exactly what you're saying.
Exactly, yeah.
All right.
I seem to recall Mike talking about some questions about whether he was questioning those excess charges as well, whether those were completely documented, legitimate charges.
So every month, they, with the excess charge invoice, Mike Sokol provides documentation as far as what is the meat of it. But I do know that there was one in particular, I think that there was 24 hours that he was questioning. I do believe that they provided the documentation, but it's an ongoing, you have to really pursue and ask for those questions and that information.
Well, I'm just, I'm wondering from a business sense if part of their, does it benefit Peterman for us to go to an 8-hour contract
Why not?
in the long term? So, would they be subtly encouraging us to go to an 8-hour contract?
When I talked to Brad Tate last week, he said that a number of school districts have reverted from an 8 to a 6 because they were finding that they would rather pay for the midday routes and the excess cost because in the long run it was cheaper than versus automatically having to pay for the 8-hour day per bus driver. But that doesn't mean that that's not the correct answer for us. We do need to take a look at what the cost difference would be. And it could be good for us one year and then not good for us the next.
And we don't know that information,
we don't
exactly
know.
what you're saying, because we haven't looked into what an 8-hour day would be,
Right.
or a combination of 6 and 8.
Right, but
So-
districts are moving to the 6-hour and then just paying the excess because they have found that it would save them money in the long run.
Well, and if we went to an 8-hour with changing routes, then maybe we wouldn't even need one of those routes. Because I know that working with the transportation coordinator, when we didn't have a bus service, we would sit every year and look at rerouting and try to save on the routes. Because if you can save on one route, as big as we are,
That's a lot of money.
that's a lot of money. So, I mean, those are all factors that have to be considered when we're thinking about 6 versus 8. I mean, hours.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm more interested with the audit and with this slide, I'm more interested in the capital cost charges. That was eye-opening to me that we're paying for buses that we don't own. Maybe I'm not understanding that completely, but
We are being charged $64.20 a day for all 36 buses. So we need to be able to have buses that, just in case one of them breaks down, you have another one that can slide in. So we have 4 additional buses that we're only paying the $64.20 a day on, and that's just to make sure that we always have a bus on hand if another one breaks down.
I think the auditors seem to be suggesting that we were one of the few districts that had this.
There's a couple other in Butler County that do.
Okay.
I've spoken with them. They do have the capital charges.
Oh, okay.
You got to remember, they picked peer groups that were not necessarily like similar to us or close to us.
And it depends where you're located. So if I'm in a Peterman area and the next district uses Peterman or close enough, I could bring in Peterman buses. Our next closest is Lakota. Not really manageable for them to send in extra sub buses or something if it breaks down. I mean, they'll do that if they need to. I mean, they are good about that, but we're not surrounded by Peterman districts that could help out.
Where they have a reserve of buses they can draw on.
Well, and the thing is that especially on like the trips for athletics, several times those buses have broken down and they've been able to get a bus to the
Yes.
kids and the coaches on that bus within a short period of time, which has been very valuable to families because, if kids are texting and saying, we just broke down on the side of, I just remember down there by Rumpke one day, and so, within 25 minutes, they had another bus down, they reloaded, and the kids were safe.
And we've
So-
had 2 fender benders, no students injured. I don't know if you remember this,
Yep.
but,
Within 2 or 3 days.
and we've had to send out buses to come and get that, which we had the bus here, so it wasn't like coming from Lakota,
Yeah.
which would have been a 40-minute extra wait on time to get students transferred.
So then those 2 buses are out of commission being worked on, and then it's kind of like a rotating.
Yeah.
So it's our safety net to have a couple of other buses.
That's a much clearer explanation than I feel like I got from the auditors, which sounded just like a, why are you doing this kind of question.
I can give you specific Butler County, I'm not off the top of my head, but, you know, I have a meeting tomorrow. I can get specific schools that also have the capital charges if you'd like.
Oh, yeah, I'd like to know that.
Well, here's what their notes said. I found them. We pay $64.20 per bus. In comparison, Goshen and Xenia community contracts do not contain a provision for capital cost charges. So are the capital cost charges just for these 4 extra buses?
No, it's on all 36, because they're maintaining those buses.
Right.
They're
right.
doing
So
all the oil changes, they're doing the...
I think what the auditor's saying is we're paying $64.20 per bus, and these other schools, Goshen and Xenia, that they compared us to are not. And so why is that in our contract and not in their contract? And so that's, and I didn't look at their contracts, obviously.
But it could have to do with what Ed was saying about being near districts where they have other buses nearby that can be easily brought in. I mean,
It
we
could
just
also
don't
be
know.
that they have a higher charge per route, period. So they have a higher charge, where ours is like $350 per route per day.
Right.
Theirs could be $375, $400, and so they've just lumped everything together versus separating the 2.
Right.
Why it's separated into 2, I can't answer that.
Right.
Because I didn't, negotiate the original contract, but it could be that Goshen and the others have it all in one.
Those are all good questions to ask.
I agree, we need to find out that
Yeah,
information.
exactly.
Because I paid an auditor $60,000 to tell me I could save $657 if I do this, and you're telling me, well, he didn't consider this or this or this.
Well, and they didn't.
Why did I pay him $60,000 to give me information I can do nothing with? Because he didn't consider all the little extra parts, which is what you're telling me. It's all right. I'm good.
Very good. So Ms. Stafowski will be really looking at the bus contracts for us. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay, moving on, I do believe that we're done with transportation, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the final recommendation is the food service. They're recommending eliminating 41.5 daily labor hours from the food service operation, which could prevent the yearly average loss of $61,502 over the past 3 years.
Why is this one given to us in labor hours rather than FTEs?
Great question, glad you're asking, because that's how we pay them. We pay them in hourly versus FTEs. So, but it's a great question, because remember, we also have different amount of people at each building. I think at the elementary, is it 2 or 3?
3
3.
at each elementary.
So it might be removing,
Some hours from each.
yes.
Right.
Because they look at, again, kind of what they did with the custodians. They say, based upon your population, based upon the amount of meals you provide, the industry standard is, and I don't know this, 1 cafeteria worker should serve 200 meals or something
Right.
like that, whatever it is.
Right.
And we are over 41.5 hours day with the amount of people that we have according to the industry standard.
And that's within all 5 buildings.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
So it's 41 on overall.
Yes.
Yes.
And we've been losing money for the last 3 or 4 years
Yes.
in our food services. And I know that was one of the reasons that we went with that part-time person to assist us with that, to help us out, to kind of figure out what's going on with that, coming in with a new set of eyes, I think. So, Shauna, I don't mean to take any information, but that's kind of what I
No, I'm
understood.
concerned. I just took a look at a report to see where our finances are right now for the food service, and with everything that is still encumbered, which could close out. I'm telling you, this $57,000 tied up in purchase orders some of it could get closed out. But we still have 2 payrolls, and we're looking at an $86,000 deficit right now. So I have an email into our director to have her get me off the cliff, because I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So,
And we've been drawing on the fund balance for that account, haven't we?
what's that?
We've been drawing on the fund balance for that account.
Yes, we had a nice cushion going in 2010 and 2011, and then the new nutrition standards came into play. Cost a lot of people, increased food costs with all the fresh fruits and vegetables, which is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, but it increased our costs. It decreased our participation. Our participation has decreased because we're only allowed to use a certain amount of sodium. They are getting they're getting smaller portions. The components the components are necessary, don't get me wrong, but to encourage a child to get a complete meal, which means they have to get 3 out of the 5 components, they find it easier just to buy a la carte. So our a la carte sales are fantastic, but where we get our money is by selling the meals, because we want that reimbursable meal. If they buy an a la carte, it's not considered a reimbursable meal. It's just, an a la carte sale. So I've been wanting to really increase the meal participation. Now, granted, with COVID, it kind of went, we were on an upswing, and then COVID hit. Now, has COVID affected this? No, because the reimbursements that we've been getting from the state during COVID have more than covered any of our expenses. So this also could be that we are going into June, so we're fronting the June costs, but we're not going to get our June reimbursement until July, because you get reimbursed the month after you file the claims. So we're going to see we could see a small deficit right now, hopefully a lot smaller than $86,000. But hopefully we will rebound in July with that receipt. The last thing that I want to do is have to advance money to the cafeteria fund. So this needs to be a self-supporting fund, ideally. A lot of districts don't. A lot of districts at the end of each year will cover the deficit from the general fund, and I'm not of the mindset to do that. I would like this to be self-supporting, as it was designed to be.
So
Unless the refrigerator goes down and it's a $50,000 expense, that's different. But
Is this a reasonable recommendation? Is it a practical recommendation? I'm kind of feeling like it's another one of those that we don't really have enough information about.
42 daily hours is a lot.
It sounds like a lot.
That's a lot. If they had said 41 hours per week, that's one person.
Right.
That's one person. But daily, that's very extreme.
5 people.
Right. Exactly.
Well, and a lot of the employees are not full-time.
They're not. They're like 3 hours.
3 hours.
5
They're
hours.
kept
so
under.
it could be
They're
even
kept
more.
under.
It could be even
Yeah.
more than the 5 people, based on some of them are 3 to 5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, are we efficiently and effectively using the labor pool that we have? I have had a conversation with one of the people who does that work, who said that, she's often noticed some of these part-time people, they don't even need them for the whole time that they're there. So is there a possibility that we are at least a little overstaffed in some ways?
I think that we are one person overstaffed.
For sure.
We are at least one person overstaffed, and when this person retires or decides to leave, they will not be replaced. But we are kind of tied to the contract and agreement and all of that. So with attrition, we can make it right. So we had one person leave at Marshall. This year, we moved a staff member from the high school and moved them over to Marshall. So we didn't hire anyone new. We just did some internally shuffling, and that was part of, that was allowable in the contract. So with attrition, we can make.
I think part of the question was those part-time people who are doing just the 2 hours here, 3 hours there. Do we need all of those part-time? Are we using them efficiently?
I agree we need to look at, but I'm going to throw COVID right back at you. And the reason why I want to say that is if next school year we're not allowed to use the cafeteria because of social distancing, you get where I'm going with this? Because you can't keep people 11 feet apart, 6 feet apart. We may need all hands on deck to provide lunches in the rooms. So I'm not saying there is room. I believe there is room, and we've talked about this. But we also need to just wait a little bit and see what happens with that too. Because we may
I'm not
need to-
recommending we do anything on this right now. Again, I don't think we can really, for most of these things, in a normal world, we might be able to say, yeah, let's look at this, let's do this. We can't make any of these decisions right now, period. But I think just giving a direction of, in a normal world.
Yes, so, and we've had this discussion. I think Sean and I are on the same page about this, exactly what you just said about it.
Oh, I cut you off. My recommendation is to bring Mary Lynn into one of the board meetings and have her give a talk on the cafeteria and what she sees for the future and meal participation and all that. So as soon as we have a regular session, whether it be in July or in August, we will invite her in to present and answer any questions.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, consider that done.
Excellent.
Anything else on food service? Okay. Need my readers for this one. So the PowerPoint is incorrect for the next 3 slides. So if anyone is watching, just ignore them. In front of you, I put together the 3 stapled sheets. This is an option to our fiscal issues going on right now. This is a retirement incentive simulation. I did a workup on 10,000, 15,000, and 20,000, and this is what we could offer people to retire. So in the certified staff, there is a pool of 30 or 31 people that I identified that either by age or by years experience, they were eligible to go out, or they were so close that depending upon their personal family history, it could be beneficial for them to go out even just a couple years earlier. So out of those, I just isolated 10 because not everyone is going to, take advantage of this. Same for the classified staff. There was 27, I believe, and so I just, picked a number 10 just to see what it would look like. So if we offered a $10,000 retirement incentive, and my plan would be that this would have to be a very quick turnaround. They would have to decide within no more than 3-4 weeks, because there would have to be staff that would need to be hired to replace them. Or it could be decided that that person is not necessary. We can shuffle around within the buildings or the subject matters, and they're not needed. But there would still need to be time to figure all of that out. So with my simulations here, if we offered $10,000 incentive and these 20 people, combined certified and classified, took us up on it, and the caveat on this is that we could not replace them with anyone higher than step 3. So that would be the condition. No one higher than step 3. So if they come in at step 0, our savings could be higher. If they come in at step 3 with a master's plus 150, then obviously our savings go down. But this is based on step 3 bachelors just to create a nice average. And $10,000 could give us $1 million in savings. $15,000 could give us $930,000 in savings, and $20,000 could give us $816,000 in savings.
Over 4 years?
Yes, I'm sorry, yes. Thank you for that clarification.
And in the past, we've done this. I think years ago, we did this.
We have. So I believe in '09 and '10, we did a $5,000 incentive. And I can't tell you how many people took advantage of it, but we did have some people who took advantage of it. So this was offered up at my husband's place of employment a couple years ago at Union County School District in Indiana. And they offered $20,000 or $25,000, and it was put into a health savings account for them. And it got a lot of people to retire. It even got people to retire who were not even eligible. And they just decided that they had had enough, and they were going to go find another path. But it got them to save some money.
So which of these amounts would you recommend?
Well, if you're really wanting people to go, then I would recommend the 20.
But I would recommend maybe we look at step 2 instead of 3, maybe.
But it
If
needs
they
to be
were to hire back,
The 15.
Oh, yes.
you know, lower
I would
it,
actually do the
do
10
this
and 15.
and this.
And it has to be timely.
Yeah.
I think 10,000.
It has to be timely.
go.
We have to know early.
Especially the.
And we also have to notify, this is a one-time agreement, and it may not occur ever again in somebody's career. Or maybe it will, but we don't want people to think, oh, this will be offered next year, the year
No,
after, year
this is
after.
a one-time deal. This is a
Right.
one-time deal to save some money.
Well, it's almost like when the state changed how much longer you had to work, and we had a whole bunch of people say, we're going, and so, we encouraged that, and we did give, it wasn't 20,000, but, and we had a lot of people go that year, because they were going to have to work a couple extra years, so it was worth it.
So if we get a big response to this, I'm sorry, were you done?
No, we just need to be timely with it, and
Yeah.
help them understand one time.
One time. And I also believe that you need to be vested with Talawanda. So you need to have worked here for 10 years. You couldn't have worked here for 2 and this was your rehire job and you've only been here 2 years. You need to be vested with Talawanda, and that's 10 years in my opinion.
Good point.
And you were saying timely, that it was, that if we're going to do this, we need to move on it.
Move.
And what is the likelihood that if we have these 10 people who make this choice, 10, 12, whatever, that we'll be able to then fill these positions with a step 2? Is the pool out there?
Well,
guess is what
I don't
I
know.
think right now, people are looking for jobs, to
Oh,
be
yeah.
honest with you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we will, especially in the classified area, certified, they have to July 10th to make a decision unless they're released from their contracts, and we have a few of them. But I also think, looking at that list, there would be some of them that would be interested in taking this buyout, I'm going to call it buyout, and coming back and being rehired at a lower rate because they're going to get pension plus. The only thing we got to be careful is the amount of days that they have to wait to come back,
120.
which is it 60 days, Mary?
Well,
I think it's
maybe it's 60. It is. They can't be in for 60 days.
60 days.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they lose some of like the first paycheck or something like that. But we can make that work when I'm looking at these positions, if that was a stumbling block.
How are we doing with, I know this is maybe on the side, but how are we doing with hiring right now? Are we getting good candidates?
Yes, we are good. However, I know of somebody that's been hired by another school board, so this person would be leaving us, but we have not received the resignation yet.
Yeah, so they cannot.
So
need to be
we've
careful.
posted an anticipated position, and we'll interview and get that ready so that we'll have it ready before that July deadline. But we are in good shape. This is the first year I just blew it. I just jinxed myself by saying that because you know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Well, I know I've been getting a lot of calls on recommendations from my student teachers, and they've been getting hired, but they're brand new, so they're cheap.
So we need to take action on this, right?
Yeah,
We do.
let's do it. Are we, did I hear recommending the middle step, the 15? I mean, is that,
I think Shauna. was
My
saying
recommendation
10.
is the 10 or 15. I would start with, it's your decision. And you have to make it,
I don't know.
you have to make it so enticable that they really think and they really take a look at their finances. So you really have to make it enticing. When my husband went to that meeting and they were all, and I think it was closer to 25, it had him coming home and saying, "Can we do it?" And I said, "No, we still have a kid in college." No. But, it did. And it had some friends of his who were not even eligible deciding to go out. So, and now they're pursuing some other adventures. But,
So is the 15 enticing enough without hitting our budget too hard?
Without a market study, I don't know how it's just, we're going to have to, without really doing any research, I think it's just a gamble as to what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Can you go 15 and a 2? I mean, is that possible?
step 2.
Yeah.
Hire back if they want
We
it to be
can
hired
do
back.
anything you want. I would love a step 2. I would love a commitment from the board for the next couple of years that we're not hiring higher than step 2. And let me tell you, my husband has 30 years of teaching experience. Even if he retired in Indiana and came working here, not saying that he is, but even coming in at step 3, which was the simulation, he wouldn't be taking much of a pay cut because he's coming from a district that's the lowest paying in Indiana. So to some of these people, step 2 could still be very enticing. And I
So,
would like to see.
We're talking about this incentive. I
I
just
know
want to
that.
clarify.
I know
Yeah,
that.
because I want to clarify because there are some positions that are very difficult to fill. And
Math.
sometimes we have to do a step 5. I will tell you, when we do the hiring for that, we always look at the most qualified person. I don't want to say the cheapest, at the lowest rate that we possibly can do. And there are some positions like speech and language, we can't always fill those positions because there's just not enough people, OTPT.
Okay.
But for this incentive, step 2 is fine. Step 2 with 150 or step 2, period. I mean, that's another discussion as
It
well.
could be anywhere on step 2. It could be, honestly, step 2 bachelor's, but, I mean, it could be anywhere on the spectrum because you still might be able to find those step 0 right
Right.
out of college, and so it's going to average out.
Because remember, 0 for us is actually step 1. Step 1 is 2. Step 2 is 3, if that makes sense.
So
Is that how you're doing it? I want to make sure that because we have a 0,
Whatever
1,
the
2.
master scale was, step 3 is what I took.
Okay,
It had a 0 in it, though.
yeah, so yes.
I used the schedule
Yep.
of
So
step
you're
3.
doing exactly, yeah. So
Okay.
0, 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Or 0, 1, 2, which I would think 2 would be okay.
All right.
But
I will
That's
go
up
for
to the
step
board.
2 easily.
I would too.
So 15,000 and step 2? Is that?
Put it on the table.
No more
it on the
than
table?
step 2.
Who's going to
Should we
do
make
it?
that a motion?
Yes, make a motion.
All right, I move that we do this retirement incentive at $15,000 with a commitment to not rehire or not hire into those positions anything higher than a step 2.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Who seconded it? I'm sorry.
Mary
Okay.
Jane?
Any discussion? I'll wait.
What's the turnaround that you would like? Like I said, I think it needs to be quick. I think it needs to be a quick decision, no more than 3 weeks. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it needs to be no later than the end of January. Put it in there, like when we come back in January. You know what I'm saying, that month of
January,
January?
did you say January?
Pardon me? We need it now. Are you talking about for this year
Right
yet?
now. Yep.
Right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I was thinking you were talking
Next
about
year.
for next
yeah.
year.
We can do
Oh.
it now. And
Oh, it's got to be a short window then.
Right.
So we can get new people.
So we'll say 3 weeks? We'll
Start-
amend the motion to say 3 weeks?
Bring it back to the next board meeting for approval?
Starting when, 3 weeks? Now?
When would you start it?
I would say bring it back, that it's all done and wrapped up by our next board meeting, which is July,
15th, I think.
no, 9th. It's before the deadline.
Oh,
It's the
July board
it's
meeting?
the 9th, isn't it? Our next
Okay.
board meeting is the 9th.
If you're okay with that, it is. The reason why we did July 9th is last year, we
Yeah.
got into a quorum that it was after the July 10th deadline. So we had all these resignations and we couldn't interview and hire without getting other districts to release. So by moving it up, I don't know if it's going to solve the problem, because this year we look like we're pretty okay. We wanted to have that day, if we needed to, get people approved so that they can notify their home districts and not have to worry about going to their district and asking for approval, which they could have said.
I
no.
like it on the 9th because I can get to Michigan then.
There you go.
So we need to know from them prior to the 9th, though. So I'm looking at a calendar.
Are you still going to put a 3-week limit on them informing the
I-
district?
I would think so.
So a 3-week limit, so if this, I mean, if this gets out there, if this offer is out there by, even by next Monday, that's still 3 weeks is July the 6th.
Yeah, it's going to have to go quickly so
Yeah.
we can get it going because of exactly what you just said. Because we don't want to hit that July 10th like we did.
So they would have to make their decision by July 6th? Is that what we're saying?
I would say you don't even put a decision, let Shauna do it, and our goal will be,
A 3-week window.
correct,
Yeah.
and we'll establish it and to get it to the board for the July 9th board meeting.
I would say probably June, either.
But I think we can do that, you can
We
do that.
can, I
You can
know, I'm just kind
establish
of
the
talking
deadline.
June 30th or July 3rd, because people go on vacation, and so they're going to
Well,
have
that's
that
true.
decision made. This is the holiday right there.
Yeah, that's true. But we don't need to amend the motion.
No.
What we're saying is
No.
we're just going to
No.
let you do
I
that
think
time.
we
That
do
was
the
an
details.
internal thought that I just wanted
It's an
to,
internal thought.
Except if it's out in public. you-
I
I mean, you have
voiced
to
it.
let them know that-
Any other discussion? Ms. Stafowski, would you call the roll?
yes, Dr. Howard,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts,
Yes.
Dr. Nydabowitz,
Yes.
Mr. Mead,
Abstain.
Mr. Otto.
Yes.
Motion carries. 4 yes, 1 abstain.
Thank you.
Can I just, real quick, and I just wanted to let you know that Dennis has been texting me and I've been ignoring him. But he wanted me to, because I just didn't look at my phone. So he just wanted to remind everybody about the current supplementals that they get are on stretch pay 2. So our current supplementals for this school year, they go through September pay because of how we pay 2 weeks behind. So he just wanted to let you know that.
Is this, are we acting on the start time at the
No,
next meeting?
yes, the next board meeting. So Holly and I have collected data on that too, which we can give you more information on that on the late start time from people. Okay, we okay with me going?
Oh, I'm not done.
We still have other
Okay,
matters.
go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to wrap things up. These are the possible steps to address any future operating deficits. We can take action on the recommendations from the performance audit, and we've already reviewed that. We're coming up with a plan. You gave us some action points to bring back to you, so we're good on that. We did vote on the retirement incentive options. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. We could, in addition to that, make a commitment to hiring staff at a maximum step 3, except for the hard, really hard.
And we do that. I mean, that's already in our process.
Okay.
You will look at the staff members that we've hired. We've hired a lot of staff members that are fresh out of college, which is a great thing. I mean, they bring in fresh blood too, and We've hired some people that are a little bit more expensive because we couldn't find a position.
So it's a soft commitment.
Just-
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I agree to that we will do the soft commitment to do our best, as evidenced by the 517,000.
Right.
And we should have a little bit more when that person leaves officially.
Very good.
Okay, the next item would be to chase more grant monies, especially for safety, security, and student wellness. So we could seek out more of the federal grant dollars out there. We're always looking to find offsets for any new expenses so that we don't increase, so we're already doing that. We could review the assumptions for the one-to-one technology replacement schedule and future textbook adoption requirements. I'm just going to repeat this. We're going to be spending $2 million over the next 4 years on the one-to-one initiative. So we could really take a look at those assumptions and see if we could scale down a little bit without sacrificing our kids and our staff on the technology needs that are required.
Shauna, can I ask a question on that? This would involve Matt Ram and
Yes,
some
correct.
other people? Because, some of those are old. I mean,
I
we
know that.
started quite a while ago.
Correct.
And that's why we built that replacement in there.
Right.
To make sure that they were not going to go down on us, so.
Right.
I was just, I assumed you were going to be talking with him and then come back to us with some.
How about if I bring him to the board meeting and he can answer questions? I'll put him on as a presentation and we can talk about it. Again, the concern will be we're online because we can't open or because we're shut down and having those, we've got to have those Chromebooks operational. Because if we're not, we can't do online instruction.
Well, and we know, we've heard from other districts on some of the meetings that we've been on, that some districts have struggled because their kids didn't have access.
That's right.
CPS being one.
Yeah.
So,
That's right.
we don't want to put our students in that position, not really knowing where we may be going for the next year or so. So, thank you, Shauna.
Yeah, no, that was just without sacrificing the educational needs of the
Gotcha.
staff. So to really just take a look at it. We were able to move some of that one-to-one money into Title IV this year because the state allowed us to do a waiver on it and eliminated the need to, do some in supplies, some in technology, and some in salaries. This was a one-time waiver, and so we were able to pool all of that money in Title I and to get iPads for K through 1, I believe. So, and that was it. I'm done.
Thank you very much. Next is the items from the superintendent.
Okay, I'm sorry, just 1 second, get right back. Okay, I'll move a little bit quicker, hopefully. Shauna did a real nice job, and I appreciate the thoroughness because I feel that I have a better understanding of what's going on in my role as a superintendent and the budget and how I can move forward and positively impact. So I really appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
Options for next school year, ideas and unknowns. We've talked about this a little bit, but I want the community to know. We are still waiting for some sort of direction and guidance on this. We need the direction and guidance in order to really make a full-fledged plan and to communicate with you. I've heard of other districts that have done a survey asking what you want as a community member. I believe community members want their children back in school. I believe there may be some that want to keep their kids home for whatever reasons, medical concerns or safety concerns. However, what I don't want to give you is a false hope or impression that your feedback comes in and then we say, nah, we're not going to use any of your feedback because we can't, because we're directed not to. So my intent is when we find out what we can do, our leadership team has come up with some ideas, and whatever that plan is, then we will reach out to you. with a survey, because then we can propose to you what's out there, and you can help decide what you want to do. For instance, maybe you don't want to ride the bus or have your child ride the bus anymore. Well, that may help us with seats. Maybe you're going to transport all the time. Maybe you want an online option because you're worried about the health of your child or for whatever reason it may be. That may be something that we're able to offer. And then we can collect that data that then will help drive us to an even better option provided. So here are the options. Full start with no restrictions. I doubt that this is going to happen. I believe there will be some sort of restrictions here. So that's option one. Second one is a full start back with some restrictions. A third option is a hybrid model, online, and modified return with restrictions. So what that means is that we might be bringing in students 1 or 2 times a week. Again, busing is going to be the major factor in that. And then the other days, they are working online. Please note again, that's not my favorite option. That may be the option that comes. The favorite option for me is to get all students back into the building safely. But I don't know if that's going to happen. We know that's the best teaching. The other is a hybrid model that looks at bringing back pre-K through 5th grade or 6th grade. This is the one that was released by ODE in their recommendations. And then 7 through 12 would be online. Well, if we did the pre-K through 5, we could get students to school using our 2 routes, 32 routes, plus the 32 routes TMS and THS times, as well as the elementary time, and we could get students, the elementary students, here every day. But then you might not be able to if there's social distancing in the classroom, meaning we can only put in anywhere from 8 to about 15 students, depending how big the class is with 6 feet apart. So again, going back to busing and social distancing in the classrooms, those are what we need to do. And then the last option is a full online pre-K through 12. Not our preference, not what we want to do, but we're also going to plan for this no matter what. Because if, God forbid, the pandemic increases and the health department or somebody closes us down, we need to have that option ready to go and at a higher level. And I'm not saying that we want to do that. Hear me on that. I can tell you we're in conversations with the governor. I believe we advocate a lot from Talawanda. We're now in a great superintendent group, and we're finishing up a superintendent letter and treasurer letter this Thursday coming up that we're also going to ask for clarification and directions from the governor, health departments, and everybody else that we possibly can, so we have clear guidance, and we want them to talk with each other. We don't want ODE saying one thing, governor saying another thing, and health department saying another thing. And that's what's kind of happened here lately, in particular, the graduation services. The graduation services, I can tell you, the Talawanda plan, when we submitted it, was following the exact recommendations. And then there were some changes made to it by the governor, by the health department, and that made it seem like Talawanda didn't care. We do care, and we wanted it safe. And when it opened up, we followed those requirements, and we were allowed then, after a virtual ceremony, to bring in students to do that walk on the stage if they wanted to do that with their families there. So I know that they're going to throw it at us. It's local control. I love local control. However, they're doing this as a disservice so that they can pit us against each other, because there are some smaller school districts that don't have a problem with busing, and they can transport their kids, not a problem. We will have a problem due to the geography, the amount of hours, and how many kids are on a bus with that. So there are options being mulled over. We have another leadership meeting coming up next week, as we talked about, and we continue to define these frameworks for these options. And when we know, we will get the information out to you. Unknowns, we talked about bus transportation, 6 feet of distance. If that, right now, they're recommending only 11 students on bus. That's how you do 6 feet of distances. So 11 students times 30 bus routes equals 330 students only transport. Why the 2 routes? We also have to transport Butler Tech students, and we also right now have to transport students from parochial and private schools. There is an option that due to this budget, due to these concerns, the board could take action and no longer provide services to the parochial and private schools in lieu of the state minimum requires that we would have to pay each family at least $250 per family for transportation needs. So that's an area. If they allow us 30 students, which I'm hearing is the next step, which was on the ODE released draft document, that brings in 30 students times 30 routes, about 900 students. And then we can have family members can sit 2. And then we look at transportation meaning students who are dropped off, because we have a lot of students that are doing that. So we're looking at 1,050, 1,100 students. Again, that's a problem because we transport 2,200 students per day. Not enough, so that's half the amount of students. So in order to transport half the amount of students, that means they have to come AB days, right? Half on one day, half on the next day. Half on one day, half on the next day. And in the meantime, the other days, we'd have to do some sort of online. It's a problem. Now, we could quadruple our busing, which we cannot afford to do that, as we're talking about tonight as well, to be able to do that. We don't know, we've talked about this extensively, the reduction by the Ohio Department of Education, the governor, income tax, property tax, and what that would look like. ODE, Health Department, governor restrictions, talked about that, and requirements. We need to know what they are and not. 1 hour bus routes. We are going to try to maintain no more than the 1 hour bus routes. That's a long time to be on the bus. It's a long time for a 5-year-old, a 6-year, and I know community members. But if we start reducing and having to spread out, we can't do a 2-hour bus route. We can't do a 1.5-hour bus route to make it work. We need to look at geographic or grade level pickups. If we need to socially distance on buses and bringing them into school, that may help reduce busing so that we can bring in more students, if that makes sense, to make sure that the buses are filled at 30 students or filled at 11. But we just talked about that earlier with Dr. Roberts. That means you can't change buses. Your pickup site is where you're dropped off because we can't have you bumping another student out of a seat of that. And that is going to impact families. But if you're dropping off and picking up at a daycare, that would work because that's whatever bus number it is. It's just a changing of the buses that would not work. Field trips. We're going to have to look at that. We're going to have to look hard at that with the social distancing and those requirements. We may not be allowed to have field trips. We're going to have to look at sports and extracurriculars, what's going to be allowed. We're also waiting to hear on that. Yes, we can do strength training and skills training, and we are doing it. It's going very well, and students have been really great at maintaining the distance, and they're happy to be back. But again, do we know if football is going to exist next school year? We don't know that, and we need some decisions on that as well. Later start time should not impact any of this because all we're doing is sliding this way. We're not reducing numbers or anything like that, and we will bring more information at the next board meeting on the data that we have collected so far. And if anybody wants to put in what they believe for the later start times, please contact Holly Morrish or myself. Several people have already, and Holly has already communicated that on social media and Facebook, I believe, as well. Talked about that. Oh, high school's the other thing. We could possibly look at the elimination of high school routes. I'm not saying I want to do that, but if we do that, that could be a possibility that we could bring in more high school students to high school, because the high school tends to have the bigger rooms with it. Most of them can fit 15 students in the classroom, but with them transported with the middle school, and we can only transport 30 in a bus, we got a problem. You see where I'm going with that? And I'm not saying I'm in favor of eliminating high school bus. I worry about our student drivers. I worry about kids getting in with other cars. I get that. But those are some things that we might have to consider. And parent choice to transport or to go online. We are looking at providing an online option for those families who are concerned about coming back. So those are some of the unknowns and some of the options that we have. Are there any questions about that or concerns?
I just think it's going to be important what the contiguous to us districts do.
All right. I'm glad you brought that up, Dr. Roberts, because I can tell you right now some stuff too. I just was notified, I wasn't looking at my email really, yes I was, by a school district, Ross, that they have moved their calendar back to start time after Labor Day. And they're doing that so that they have more time for planning to get ready for whatever the option. They feel that we're not going to be notified in 2 to 3 weeks, and they're going to need time to work with the teachers to get them ready for whatever that option is. That may be something that we consider as well. And I also heard that there's a push, I know of one, yeah, it does touch us, one school district that touches us that's looking at, no matter what's said, they're under a different health department, that they're bringing back their kids. And they don't have to worry about the busing and social distancing because their health department, I guess, isn't pushing as much on that. So you're right, and I am fearful that we will look different than them, and they will look different than us. So.
And Miami is now back a week early, which you also know, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. And they're not doing like Thanksgiving break or something. They're condensing it.
The week of the 17th to Thanksgiving, everybody goes home and does the end of the semester online. And so they just announced that.
And then through J term, so they're gone for 3 months or something.
So, and again, they were expecting the flu to mirror or go with the coronavirus, and who knows which is which, to be honest with you, and who knows where the testing is or isn't at that point in time. And I am seeing conflicting data about taking temperatures, for instance. We have purchased, thank you, Shauna.
Yeah, we have 40 thermometers that are going to be distributed between the buildings. We have 2 of them in the board office that we are using.
Currently.
One is at the back door, and we take our temperatures and log it when we walk in. And then the one at the front can do the people who are coming in, and then they'll log it.
So the concern that I have, I'm hearing now, is asymptomatic. You don't know, and you may be passing it on, or maybe they are not passing it on, and by the time you have a temperature, you've passed it on already. So is it really worth doing it, not doing it? You can't do the thermometers at the bus stops, because if it's too cold, it doesn't register. If it's too hot, doesn't register. And you got to be like, how many inches? It's really
2
close,
inches.
because if you don't, it comes out low or whatever. It comes out to like 95, and like that isn't real. So again, we're working through some of that stuff as well for that. Is there any other comments?
So temperatures for staff and faculty, does that have to be an MOU?
No, I do not believe that it has to be an MOU. I believe that is a procedure that we're putting in place at this point in time. And I'm going to be honest with you. I know they're not here at this point in time, but the union, we've had multiple discussions, both unions, and about the audit, about this. And I know that they have to represent the whole, their areas, but they understand the concerns that we have from financial to doing teaching next year and what that may or may not look like. And they were really good about helping us with the online learning that we were rushed into. To have a professional development where there was 270 some teachers on that PD that was virtual during this closing is amazing, and we had that. I can't thank Lindsay Gregg and her team. I can't thank Matt Rand and his team for making it, because they did all sorts of professional development, how to increase skills for technology, to do better classroom instruction online, and problem solve. And then they archived it into a library, because sometimes you hear it, oh, I got it then, but then I go to actually do it, like, I don't remember it, or I need a little refresher. They could go back and get those at any point in time. So I think answering your question is, I believe the unions will work with us, because this is important, and there's not really going to be a choice, or we'll be closed.
Same way with masks then as well?
Thank you. I didn't bring that up. So employees will have to wear masks. Students, hear me, students will not have to wear masks. They will be encouraged to wear masks. If they want to wear masks, we can also provide, hopefully we'll have enough, and bring them back. Staff will have to wear masks unless there is some reason. And we will deal with those reasons on an individual basis. Some staff may even want to purchase their own, like a higher level mask. They will be allowed to do that. We're really concerned about the elementary in particular, because when you're working with students and you're working in reading, language arts, and you're looking at letter or word formation, sounds, speech and language, you can't see that over a mask. And they can't see you to make the right cues for that. So again, thank you to Shauna for the 275 shield masks that will allow that to happen. And that was donated, and she did all of that work to make that happen. So again, families, I get whatever your preference is, but we're not making this a political decision about wearing masks or not wearing masks. If the health department came and changed it, which I don't think they will, and says that students have to wear masks, then we have to enforce that. But I believe that will be up to the discretion of the district, and we will not force students. We understand those concerns. However, if you want to wear it, you're welcome to wear it. Staff, we do have control over that. We okay? Any other questions, comments? I'll get you out here soon. So the next one is questions, discussions, and board direction. I believe we've answered this, because we've stopped throughout, unless anybody wants to add anything to it.
No, I think we're good.
The last thing that I would like to do is I'd like to recommend that the board approve the declaration for Talawanda School District that it is in fiscal distress and caution due to the COVID-19, the $1 million in deficit spending. That has been what we have been spending over in the past couple years. The reduction of the $751,000 this school year by Governor DeWine, and unknown future financial reductions by the Ohio Department of Education, the governor, property tax, and Talawanda School District income levy tax. I can tell you, I have communicated with our attorneys on this. He says it is an appropriate recommendation due to all of these factors. And what that sets us up for is future action if need be.
Can you say more about that, what that future action, how it benefits us to do this, I guess?
I'll be quite clear. It could be a reduction in force, for instance. If we kept moving forward, we have to make a declaration that we are in some sort of money issue in order to be able to reduce in force.
And to reduce in force, regardless of what's in place with contracts. So to be able
Now,
to take action
there
that
is
normally we
contract-
would not be allowed to do.
Yes, there is contract language that tells you how to do, on both unions, how to do the reduction in force. But yes, we can supersede some of the contracts, for instance, if we needed to reduce. but following the process. I don't want to say that we're going out of the collective bargaining. Did that make sense on that? Or
Yes.
am I
And
right?
does this have anything to do then with, during your presentation, talking about the different steps coming from the state superintendent or whoever,
Yes.
about fiscal watch?
Yes.
fiscal-
It absolutely,
official?
it puts
We're all
us,
getting a little tired right now.
it puts us ahead of the game,
It
actually.
puts us ahead of it.
So most school districts only do that when they have so much money left and they're a year or two out from being bankrupt or taken over. We are doing it in advance because we see the picture on the wall and we have all these mitigating factors that can move us closer than 2023.
Is
if we
there
don't
any,
work.
is there any downside to it, other than a public perception that we are just throwing up our hands and giving up?
Well, and the public can believe that, but I believe we are taking active steps to understand the problem, recognize the problem, and start looking at solutions as we talk to stretch that. Again, there's going to be no answer that is going to solve this situation that we will never, ever have to come back for an operating levy the way the school funding is set up now.
Right.
I mean, but we can stretch it. And it's been a while since we've come to, had a levy. And we want to do that as much as possible.
But there's no other negative,
Well, there could be a negative perception. It could be a negative if we needed to lend money and people are looking at but that they would already see that.
right?
I really like, I like declaring that we are in this condition. I think it's important that we as a board accept responsibility for saying it, right? I think the actual wording of this isn't exactly right. I mean, Mr. Dittman did point out in his email to us this week that we were in this condition before COVID ever hit. And so is this an accurate depiction of why we are where we are? I don't really think so, and maybe that doesn't really matter. I mean, we're deficit spending, and we have to own it and declare it, which helps all of our constituents help us figure out the problem with us instead of us making executive decisions, the way we've talked about talking with people and all that. So anyway, I don't know that it matters, the wording. You can
Can I
defend
just
the
add-
way you worded it, but
That's fine.
to me, I support it in spirit, if not the wording.
So we have the recent stuff, like the COVID and all of that. But it said the $1 million deficit spending. That has been, and that's why I tried to, when I was talking about it, that has been ongoing.
Yeah.
That is not something that is new. And in fact, I am not blaming any of the boards or superintendents previous to this, but again, the way the system is made, when you pass an operating levy, you get money and you go up here. But that money is only here, right? But your expenses over time always creep up because of inflation, spending, and eventually you get to here again, and then you got to go for another operating, which gives you here. And that's exactly. So the previous boards did absolutely nothing wrong. And they've done a very good job of managing money for this long to not go for an operating. So I want to say that. So people just don't understand that school funding formula as well as that school levy process, an operational process to get it going. And you can't use capital funds. That's the other thing. So again, we knew this was coming. We thought it was going to be extended out further. In 2024, I believe we thought we would have around $5 to $7 million. It's in that area. However, COVID and that $751,000 and these other things mentioned has chipped away at us. So making it a little bit closer. So I believe, just explaining, because I understand, we saw that email from Mr. Dittman that this has been an ongoing problem. In his mind, that is in here as well as the mitigating factors. And you can't do this recommendation until you really showcase that you are in a problem. And we are in a problem. And that's why I went to the lawyers to confirm and share our finances with them and what's happening. We could not do this last year. Last year, they would have said, yeah, you're technically in the terms, but you got $25 million in the And we looked at that, and no, you can't make that statement, and you can't do that.
So I think though, I think to Kathleen's point though, I think some of it is just there's an
Wording.
awkwardness in the wording. So maybe instead of due to, and you're just sort of starting with due to COVID-19, that's like a big kind of thing. So maybe it's more of a caution due to the following influences, and then make it a list that's a clear list, not, I don't think the clarity of the list comes through in this language, in the way it's written right now. I think people see COVID-19 and they just stop there. So I'm just saying it might help just to add that, a colon.
If you want to recommend a change, you can make a recommendation, change it for it.
Right.
I mean,
So if you want to tell us how it's going to be worded, that'd be great.
Again, I would just make a very small change, and the district is in fiscal distress and caution due to several factors, including, colon, and then do the list, so that it's clear that those are separate things, that those are each, so that we're not, it's clear that the $1 million in deficit spending is one of those things on the list.
due to several factors.
Several factors, including, several factors, comma, including, colon.
Get pretty.
The grammar lady. I have a quick question for Shauna.
Yep.
Shauna?
I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah, you're writing things. I was looking before, and then isn't there a certain steps, like you're in caution first, watch second,
And then emergency.
and then emergency, and all of them are in the fiscal distress category.
So again, the lawyers gave me the language, fiscal distress and caution was the terms that they used. Now, can it be upped as we move forward and say things get worse or not better? Absolutely.
So what other factors are you going to include?
So I just kept the same factors, including COVID-19, $1 million in deficit spending, reduction of $751,000 this school year by Governor DeWine, and unknown future financial reductions by ODE, the governor, property tax, and Talawanda School District income tax levy. Income levy tax. I can't speak. Whatever that says at the end. If that's okay, and we can do it that
Good.
way.
I just wanted to be sure what they
Yeah,
were.
no, I agree to have it completely read.
So could you read that for us all,
I will.
I was
If
going to
you-
say, I only have the first sentence.
I
and
got
He
it.
has
You ready?
the other
All right.
extenuating factor.
It is recommended that the board approve the declaration that Talawanda School District is in fiscal distress and caution due to several factors, comma, including, colon, semicolon, to COVID-19, $1 million in deficit spending, reduction of $751,000 this school year by Governor DeWine, and unknown future financial reductions by ODE, the governor, property tax, and Talawanda School District income levy tax.
I'm sorry to be, but the list pattern is broken after the governor. Does anybody hear that? Unknown future financial reductions by ODE, the governor, or reductions in property
I can say
tax or
that.
income levy tax. Do you see that?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
I can do that, or reductions. Let me read it one more time.
Just so the tax piece is written in the right way. Yeah. The reduction of tax, revenue.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah, because those are important pieces.
Yeah, they are important
Yeah,
pieces in there.
As
And
we
they're-
learned
yep.
tonight.
It is recommended that the board approve the declaration that Talawanda School District is in fiscal distress and caution due to several factors, including COVID-19, $1 million in deficit spending, reduction of $751,000 this school year by Governor DeWine, and unknown future financial reductions by ODE and the governor. I'm going to put an and instead of a comma, and the governor, and reductions of property tax and Talawanda School District income levy tax.
Revenue.
But is it reduction
Tax.
of taxes?
It's reduction in the revenue.
Yeah, it's not just
I
reduction.
think if you add revenue.
Yeah,
Reductions of revenue,
Right, yeah, because you don't want to say they're going to get them.
Income tax revenue.
Income tax revenue.
That's what we're doing. Get rid of the levy and just do
I know
income
we'd
tax
have one guy
revenue.
really happy
Oh,
with
yeah.
income tax.
Oh, I think everybody.
We'd make
would.
one person happy.
And then they would be really unhappy
Okay,
to find
got
out
it.
that's not what we meant.
That's right. We got to say what we mean, right?
What if we have 3 of the 5 employees in here?
So that, the wording will be changed to property tax revenue.
yes.
Revenues.
School
Revenue.
district income tax revenue.
All right. So, do I have a motion to approve
So
three?
moved.
Thank you, 3C. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. More discussion? Thank you. Would you please call the roll?
Dr. Knight Abwitz,
Yes.
Dr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Mead,
Yes.
Mr. Otto,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Items from the board?
I would just like to thank Kathleen for the wonderful job you are doing with legislation.
Oh,
Because it's just been a wonderful thing, and I know Linda Boardman is putting it out there as well because you're giving her information, and I just have to tell you, I really appreciate you.
thank you. Thank you. Nice to say.
Any other comments?
I would just like to say I'm happy to be in the same room with all of you, but I hope next time it's a different room because it is super cold in here.
That's why I dressed like I did, because I knew
I
it
wasn't
would
ready
be.
for that.
I want to thank Holly and Ms. Morrish and Dr. Thoreau for the statement that's being put out about the racial protests and the vigil that happened in Oxford this week, and thank Pat Mead for his involvement in that. And looking forward to some conversations around what data we need to be looking at in our district around those concerns and what our families are wanting in terms of a response, in terms of more response from us. But appreciate what you guys have put out on behalf of the district and Pat's leadership in the vigil this week, so.
You have to speak louder so people can hear. You can come over to me if you want to come over.
So in anticipation of the demonstration last night, and then there was a walk that happened, and I didn't attend that, but it was my perception that that was a lot of youth in the community. We had a conversation with Amy Masechko. She's works through the HCC and some of her other about training that we can get out to her last week and said keep help our faculty and staff with race relations. Called me this morning and got a tip on something. It's being vetted right now by some folks in HCC, but it actually came from a minister in the community. And she said, Holly, it looks like some really good stuff. So I know that she's going to take that to Ed. She wants Lindsay to take a look at it. But I just wanted to let you know that we're already thinking ahead of that. And I think that'll be an important thing for us to be ready.
Any other items? Very good. So our next board meeting will be June 15th. With that, I'd like to ask for a motion to close the meeting.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Would you please call the roll?
Mr. Mead,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts,
Yes.
Dr. Knight Abowitz?
Yes.
Dr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Motion passes.